Good morning. Calling the Finance Budget Committee meeting together. Members Finlayson and Paone are present. First order on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is approval of yesterday's minutes.
Just a minute, please.
I'll move approval of the minutes as written.
Okay, I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Takia. Before we launch into the presentations, City Manager Gerald and I had a discussion yesterday afternoon about the dialogue we've been having, particularly with Alderman Savage, about having some evening meetings. There is a possibility, first of all, the evenings are pretty much booked up for virtual meetings. We can certainly have a meeting, depending upon what state you're in, Alderwoman Finlayson. We can have a actual meeting in City Council chambers. They're ready for us to be there with all the petitions and everything. Failing that, correct me if I have this right, David, I think there is a possibility of having a group meeting, a council meeting of the whole on Tuesday. That might be premature because we won't be through all of the departments, or failing that, we would be pushed out into May. So I'm not asking for, I'm asking you to think about this, but clearly Alderman Schondelmeyer, as well as Alderman Savage and Alderman Gay, all of whom work, indicated that they would like to have a session where we're all together talking about the budget. They each suggested that that might shortcut a lot of questions and backtracking when we get to the actual budget meeting, the first meeting in June. So we should be thinking about that. I prefer having meetings of the whole. I think that it adds to better dialogue, but I ask you to give me your thoughts on that particular matter, either now or later.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. I am looking at the agenda, and for the meeting on the 26th, and I don't know what day of the week that is, what's the time? There's no time indicated, at least on my copy.
That's a good point. I don't know. Takia, do you have okay. So that would be Fire and Finance. That's the day of the council meeting.
Right.
The meeting of the 27th, we have the presentation on debt affordability and talk about the capital budget and the CIP. So we're pretty much through by the morning or early afternoon of the 27th with all of the presentations. Community grants are on the 28th. We don't have that schedule yet, but if we wanted to have a virtual meeting, David, am I correct that there's one last person who would be available to run a virtual meeting on the 27th?
So if we have an evening meeting on the 27th, it needs to be in person, because there's that same night, there's a
Central
Art and Public Places meeting that needs to be covered, and there's a Port Wardens meeting. Both of those are virtual but need to be covered. So we have one person who could cover an in-person meeting on Tuesday night.
Well, may I ask, I was in council chambers yesterday just to peek my head in, and I noticed our desks were put back into their normal places. But are there going to be plexiglass shields around our desk or something?
There are.
They're already in place.
Oh, okay.
They're
really
hard to see
clear.
unless you're right on top of them, but they're in place already.
Okay.
So And I think, David, you indicated for the rest of that week, the virtual possibilities are taken up. I know I'm using one of them on the 29th for a town hall meeting. So that would push us into the first week of May if we want to do this virtually.
Mr. Chair, usually with community grants, we get them at one time and then at another meeting, we really deliberate. So maybe we could do something around the 28th.
I think the 28th was available.
Oh, you said it is not. Oh, it's not available for me in the evening. Sorry.
The 29th is not available for me in the evening.
Okay, well.
So unless we do it in person on the 27th, we're pushed out to May, which is fine with me, but we need to claim a time slot as quickly as possible because most of those evening slots are filled. And the initial thinking was we would start with the full council or all those who attend talking about police, fire, and public works, and then see where we go from there.
So we're talking about an evening meeting on the 27th in the council chambers that would be televised because it's a public meeting, but we would not need the Zoom technology that Julian brings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, we would just need one person. Right now for these meetings, it takes two people. One person in council chambers, one over in the TV studio because it's live stream. A live one would just take one person. So we could accommodate that because there's two other meetings that night, but we can accommodate the in-person, but not a virtual.
I don't want to bring up.
Then I'm good with, excuse me, Ellie, I'm good with the 27th. Scheduling that as an evening meeting for us.
Good.
Yeah, there's a conflict with the you all. It's politics, that coordinated campaign. Sheila, that monthly coordinated campaign meeting is the same.
I thought that was on Saturday.
No, he scheduled it April 27th at 7:30.
Yeah, but if we can't be there,
yeah,
I think this takes priority.
Yeah,
I
no,
have
just
it on my calendar, but
okay, just so you're aware. Yeah,
I have it on my calendar.
Yeah,
but we don't have a lot of options.
Yep.
So we have to take.
So I will send out an email today to all of the council members suggesting a virtual meeting on the 27th.
Not virtual.
I mean,
not virtual
meeting, a live meeting on the 27th in council chambers. See if that's
what time?
Liking 7 o'clock.
Can we start a little? I was going to say, can we start earlier?
Well, Fred's saying start 7:30.
No, I said 6:30.
Oh, 6:30. Oh, that is fine with me.
I was going to suggest 6 o'clock.
Fine.
But I'm good either way.
Only if you bring the pizza.
Not a problem.
Okay.
6 o'clock's fine with me.
Sorry, I'll send out an email to the council colleagues saying that we can have an in-person meeting at 6 o'clock on April 27th to go for as long as we need. And if we need to schedule successor meetings, we can do that as well. We will have heard fire by then. And so I think that we've pretty much heard from all of the departments by then. So that's good.
We will have heard from fire. They're on the 26th. Oh, okay.
I said we will have.
David, are there any restrictions about eating in council chambers or anything? Because I will bring pizza if we're going to do this. But Mr. Chair, would you please not say we'll go as long as we need to? Can we set a time?
Did you see the county council at their last meeting?
No, but I can imagine how long that must have gone. And we've looked at that before.
Okay.
Julian's got his hand up.
Hey, I just wanted to just chime in too, and just to make sure that whoever you're inviting for that meeting is aware that they'll be in person as well. So we won't necessarily have had a chance to test the hybrid version of having people Skype in for this, so that anyone that you want presenting, they would have to be here as well.
Okay.
Well, another question then. Can they come? They can't come to City Hall. They have to Skype in?
No, that's what I'm saying. For this, we would. So we're in the process of testing the Skype to make sure it works, but we have that on the time frame for May 1st. So we're not. We currently haven't had a chance to test that just yet. So they would have to be in person for that Tuesday, unless miracles happen, which we're working on right now. But
So, David, are we prepared to have citizens in City Hall?
No, not citizens. What he's talking about is if department heads or other staff need to
Exactly.
attend.
Okay.
So we can invite them, but they'll have to come into the meeting as well.
Right.
Okay.
With you,
Yeah.
Chief,
And Julian, I assume that Mark is available to start at 6?
yeah, we're good.
Because Mark's going to handle that, is my understanding.
Yep. Yeah, we're
okay.
ready for it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I have a quick question. Yeah, my question is just as it relates to the technology. Would it be that difficult to set up a Skype to just allow the general public, if they would like to submit comment, or if we would like to bring individuals forward to submit testimony? I mean, we are in a year of virtual meetings. I would think that we would have that technology.
That's beyond my pay grade.
Alderman, if I could just chime in. So that's what we're currently working on. That's what I said. What we're currently working on. We need to test the Skype out. That's the part of the Skype that we're talking about. For the public to join and testify virtually, because City Hall will still be closed, so that they'll have to be chiming in still on the virtual platform.
Will it be observation only, or will they be able to ask questions of us and get answers?
They'll still, the same way we have them register now. They have to register, and then they would go through. They get the Skype contact number, and then we would let them. Also, Sheila, you can see here. This is one of our plexiglass.
Oh, I see. I see a line.
Yeah,
I can't see
the
the.
Antiquia.
Mm-hmm. I looked right through it yesterday.
All right.
Great.
So I will send out the email and I will let you know what response I got. But we have Alderman Gay here now. Duan, is this amenable to your schedule?
I will make my schedule work with whatever, so that I can.
Spirit. All right, thank you. I'll send it out to everybody, but I'll personally contact Alderman Savage and Alderman Chandler, the SS Council.
Mr. Chair, did you give Alderman Gay the rule about maximum number of amendments?
No, I didn't give him. I said yesterday the rule is if you come with more spending, you have to come with cuts or a new revenue source.
Well, I have $2.5 million of surplus revenue. I'm just saying.
I don't think you do, but we'll talk about that. 2.5.
It's okay, David. It's okay, David.
Pick my head back up off the desk.
All right. We've kept Dr. Nash waiting. Is the committee ready to proceed with the presentation from Planning and Zoning?
Yes.
Dr. Nash.
Hello, good morning.
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 All right, I am Sally Nash and I am joined here today with Maria Brown. And we are going to present the fiscal year 22 Planning and Zoning operating budget. Next slide, please. First, I want to take a minute to acknowledge my staff that's been working very hard this year. We were all pushed past the breaking point, but still held it together and kept going. Thank you. Next slide. Planning and zoning is comprised of 6 divisions. Next slide, which in terms of personnel breaks down. Next slide, please. into 30 full-time employees and 5 contractual employees, which I let finance know the budget book doesn't show 3 of our contractual employees. Next slide. However, we are proposing a slightly different structure this year for a couple of different reasons. One is to address our consent decree that we entered because of the HACA lawsuit, as well as because I think it makes sense to combine economic and community development and ensure that these 2 divisions have aligned goals in terms of their purposes and priorities. Next slide. In terms of personnel, this looks similar to what we have now. Next slide, please. Oh, nope, I'm sorry, go back one.
Nope.
One more.
There.
Sorry, Julian, go ahead. There should be one personnel detail proposed after this and after this one. Yes, thank you. Nope. There we go. So in terms of personnel, this is similar to what we have now. However, with the 5 divisions, there would be 1 additional full-time employee in the new Economic and Community Development Division. Next slide. That position would be called the Low Income Housing Specialist, and the primary functions of this job would be to promote, expand, and match housing options for low-income residents using federal and state money. And we would also propose that this person could manage our MPDU program. Right now, we split the management of that program with the county, the Arundel Community Development Services Agency, which does a great job, but they are very busy people, and there would be some advantages to us being able to manage it all in-house with that additional staff member. Next slide.
Dr. Nash, would you take questions during the presentation?
Yeah, I have a question too, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
So I like this idea of adding the person, but also I wonder, given what we're hearing from the Maritime Task Force, additional duties for the economic development people in terms of outreach to particularly small maritime businesses. Are you going to have enough people? That's 4 people now, right? Teresa and Stephen and Hope, and then this new person. Will you be able to do both the low-income housing and also additional activities surrounding small maritime businesses?
That will be tricky, but I can talk to Steve and Teresa about that. I think if we move some job duties around, we will be able to accommodate that if we have this new position.
Okay. Alderman Gay, Alderman Finlayson, and then Alderman Gay.
Thank you. Dr. Nash, my question is very similar, or at least on the same topic. Economic development, small business, and minority business. Does that all fall under this new economic development?
Community
could go back to your reorganization.
Yes, economic and community development. It would fall under that division.
Okay. We had worked hard to get small and minority business focus in the city. And I would hate to, not that your, reorg isn't a good one for you, but I would just like for you to keep in mind that we had worked hard to make sure we maintain a focus on small and minority businesses. So I don't want it to be consumed with other things.
Right.
So,
that is a good point. That is an important focus of our economic development division right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Several points. The first being, I would advocate for changing the name from Low Income Housing Advocate or whatever it was to Housing Affordability Advocate or something like that. because low income applies that it only works for certain groups when housing affordability is a mass problem. So I would advocate for that change. And I'm glad to see that we are implementing this, because unlike the Maritime Task Force, this is the federal judge mandated that we create this position to communicate with HACA. And then lastly, to the point that you made, Alderwoman Finlayson, I've been working with the city manager and Stephen Rice and the Office of Law, and we're putting together a minority business proposal, and we've got a couple of dollars behind it. And so I would love to have you involved in that conversation.
Would love to be.
Thank you, Alderman Gay. Alderwoman Tierney.
Very, very quickly, Dr. Nash, is this a result of the consent decree?
Yes, it was our proposal to address the consent decree requirements.
And that will be part of this person's charge, if you will?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So if I could make 2 points, Dr. Nash. One, I like the suggested change that Alderman Gay recommended in terms of the title of this job. But I also, I'm looking at the pay grade. You know, I'm a fan of career ladders, but if we find somebody we really like, but they qualify for an A12, for example, are we constraining ourselves by just making this pay grade 10? Should we have pay grade A through 10 through 13 or something like that?
I'm open to ideas. This was just our starting point. I think some of the job duties we have in here are probably a bit advanced for an A10 grade. So we might, that's probably a good idea is to look in the A12 range.
Well, certainly give yourself a range. So if you find a great candidate at 10, you can hire there. But if you find one that really won't come unless they get a 12, and we miss an opportunity. But I see the city manager is trying to rein me in. I'm spending some of his money.
No, that's not it.
Yeah, I think it's important that we get this graded first to see what, you know, the HR process is for grading this based on the responsibilities. But we also have the ability to start them at a higher step. Most people don't necessarily care about what their grade number is, but what their salary is. And so we certainly have that ability to start them at a higher step where their income would be higher, their salary would be higher.
Was that your point too, Dr. Dickinson?
Yes, it was that we start with looking at the duties to determine what the pay grade is. And if there is somebody applying for it that has higher qualifications, they're just going to have to go a higher step and not, we're just looking for them to fit the duties of the job. But I don't know if this has been graded, and it hasn't been recently graded. It may need to be revisited.
Okay. So Alderman Gay, what was your suggested change to the title? Housing specialist?
It should be like housing affordability, because we don't even like to say affordable housing, because affordable is different to everybody. So we call it housing affordability.
What if we just called it housing specialist?
I'm open to that, but I don't know.
I'm excited about this new hire. It wasn't exactly the relief I thought for planning and zoning, but at least it's a new person, and it's certainly a very topical thing. So sorry for the interruption, Dr. Nash. If you could get us back on track, that would be good.
Okay, no problem. Next slide. I actually wanted to make sure to get feedback from you on that proposed reorganization. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to present the Community Development Division and Economic Development Division separately, but I am glad to have your feedback. All right, so Community Development Division. This division administers grants, implements neighborhood revitalization plans, administers the MPDU program with the county, and provides technical assistance on affordable housing. The picture shown is the proposed Robert H. Eads Park near Morris Blum. The planning for this park has been funded through the CDBG program, and we're hoping to secure additional federal and state grants to pay for the construction of the park. Next slide. This division's had a very successful year. Teresa's worked hard to complete a 5-year housing and community development consolidated plan. She also participated in an affordable housing task force, as well as the Baltimore Regional Fair Housing Group, and oversaw her usual CDBG grant funding efforts, as well as additional funding that we received for COVID relief. The community legacy funding went to such improvements as the Masonic Lodge, which is shown in the picture, upgrades to the facade, and other projects like Pleasant Street sewer relining.
Where are we on that project?
On the Pleasant Street, I'm not sure I would need
the Masonic Lodge.
Masonic Lodge, it's underway. We've been working with the architect and it's in progress.
Okay, good. That's a big deal.
Next slide, please. For the most part, we are on track with our goals for this division. Next slide. There's been some challenges, mainly due to what a tight inventory we have right now for affordable housing units. There's just not a lot out there because the real estate market is so tight right now. Next slide. We've been working on many public service projects, continue to partner with HACA on a lot of funding opportunities. Next slide. And to make sure that our public information is up to date so people know what we're doing. We've been working a lot on that. Also, partly in response to the HACA consent decree, making sure everyone knows what services we offer. Next slide. Comprehensive Planning Division. Been working on the comprehensive plan, also on special land use and fiscal analyses and traffic and related studies. This year, we were awarded a $438,000 grant for a resiliency planning effort with NSA Annapolis and the county. We're excited about that effort, as well as the grant we received for $224,000 from Maryland Bikeways, the state, in order to connect some of our bike trails. Next slide.
Dr. Nash, may I ask the map, not the map, but the photograph of the community, where is that? Or is that not ours?
So this is part of the West Annapolis sector study, which has gotten underway with a series of virtual town halls. And the what you see here is a proposed for community place types, which is the direction we're sort of heading to simplify our zoning code. And we're having West Annapolis be kind of a guinea pig that we'll focus on as we move through the comprehensive plan. The other map shows the parks in the city. We're also working on updating our adequate public facilities requirements so they focus more on equity. In order to do that, we had to define social vulnerability with this underlying map. And then we've overlaid the existing parks that the city has and have plotted distances because we want to make sure everyone in the city lives at least a quarter mile from a park that may not be a huge park, but is somewhere they can walk to and have for recreation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could. Taking that as a yes. Director, if you could explain the social vulnerability index used and what goes into that.
Sure. So the social vulnerability index is based on criteria that the Center for Disease Control has developed. It measures an assortment of factors, including income, employment, and other considerations. And it is applied by census block group so we can map the city in a relatively nuanced way to figure out where our more vulnerable areas in town are. It's not really a surprise if you look at the map, the darker areas, but it helps us pinpoint our efforts for improvements to our adequate public facilities.
We use the same tech, like GSI technology for the task force, very similar results with the SVI. And so would the projects that are currently in the queue shift based on this data, or would this be sometime down the road?
Well, we are hoping to update Title 22 to focus more on equity. And to do that, we would use this map in order to help prioritize projects that would help more distressed areas first as a priority.
Thank you.
Next slide. So this division has been working on the West Annapolis sector study, as I mentioned, and the Maritime Task Force. Both of those efforts are going to be integral parts of the comprehensive plan. We also assist on the Affordable Housing Task Force with data collection and have a similar overlapping methodologies as you saw. And we've also participated in the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study Task Force. Next slide. The amount of community engagement that this group has done has been impressive this year, given the circumstances. We've worked hard with our African American and Hispanic liaisons. They've been a great help. We've done outreach to the homeowners associations, civic associations through virtual town halls, online surveys, and other outreach to our boards and commissions. Next slide. So we've been successful this year meeting our goals in this division. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. And making sure that our long-term goals are consistent with the city's capital projects. Next slide. Current Planning and Development Review Division enforces the zoning ordinance, processes building permits, subdivisions, special exceptions, also considers air quality, water quality, shorelines when reviewing applications, and is in charge with administering critical area and forest conservation law. Next slide. This year, this division has worked hard with HACA to get Newtown 20 through the planning and permitting process, and worked very hard to maintain an existing level of service despite the pandemic interruptions. Next slide.
Dr. Nash, can I interrupt again, please? That last bullet point on the last slide, we're getting an awful lot of tree canopy taken down in backyards in Ward 8. I don't know whether it's just us or whether it's across the city, but it seems as though we have the deputy city manager trying to plant trees in the front. We're losing them in the back. Do we have the state staff capability, if we change the code to make all trees be required to have a replacement ratio like trees in the front yard, would you have the staff to be able to manage that? You now have a forester, right?
We have the urban forester now, and actually, Julian, could you advance to next slide, next slide, and next slide. All right, so urban tree canopy. Yes, we know that the urban tree canopy is declining overall, and it's not really with development projects where we have seen an increase in tree canopy because they are subject to our regulations. But yes, you're right, Ross, it tends to be more in the residential areas where we're losing older trees that are either dying because of old age or because they haven't been cared for and have a lot of ivy. There are a lot of difficulties with enforcing an ordinance like that you mentioned, Alderman Arnett. I would have very big concerns about our staffing level if such an ordinance was approved. I think we would need at least another part-time person to do that, to make that happen. I think what we are planning to do is to make sure that we have more education about tree maintenance. We are also updating our street tree master plan that will give guidance to people who want to plant trees in terms of planting the right tree in the right place. But planting trees in an urban environment is an expensive endeavor. And so it is a challenge. This year, I've managed to increase our budget for our tree care a little bit over last year. It's still probably not enough, but we also have the critical area MOU funds we can use and the reforestation funds we can use, and we're planning to leverage that to the maximum amount we can. So there's no doubt this is a challenge. I think we can tackle it with some education, outreach, making sure people know the value of these older trees and how important it is to take care of them.
So we had one application where the applicant had a fully forested backyard and they totally denuded it. And there was nothing that Tom Smith could do about that because of the current code. Tried to urge them not to take out all the trees, but they did. And so I'll have more discussion with you on a staff level, but I think that, it's one step forward, two steps back when people are clearing out their backyards, and we really don't have any say on that. So thank you.
We do if they have construction, but if they're not doing construction and it's not in a 100-foot buffer, and it's not in their front yard, yes, you're right. Then we don't have a say. But we do have a lot of leverage in those other circumstances.
Okay, thank you for.
I have a quick question here. So if the tree is in your backyard and you want to cut it down, you can, because I had several constituents over the course of the last year who had reached out because they wanted to take down trees in their backyard. But then they're like, oh, if you take down a tree, you have to put up a tree. And they're like, well, one, I don't have the space to plant a tree per whatever the code required. And two, it's like $6,000. So if the tree is in your backyard, you can cut it down. You don't need approval from planning and zoning.
If you are not doing any other construction, then generally speaking, yes, unless it is part of an improved landscape plan, or if you're in the 100-foot buffer for the critical area.
Yeah, I'll have to find that. I'll reach out too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nash. Sorry for interrupting the flow of your presentation.
That's
I'm sorry, may I ask a quick question? Dr. Nash, I'm looking at your last performance measure to increase the tree canopy by 0.54% a year. Given the fact that, our town is old and many of our trees are of an age now that they're starting to die, some of them. I mean, they came through my community and removed all of those trees, and they replaced them, but they replaced them with the much younger trees. So my question is, are we realistic about increasing tree canopy at a time when we know that many of our older trees are needing to come down?
Right. That is tricky because when you replace an older tree, you're going to be replacing it with a smaller tree. So, it's a cycle, and that is something to consider.
Thank you.
Anything else? Alderman Payon, I do have an update that the Pleasant Street project is complete. Universal Lodge is in procurement.
Universal Lodge has been what?
Is in procurement currently. And I misspoke. The Robert Eads Park was funded with community legacy funding, not CDBG funding.
Well, that's great news. Thank you.
Okay, next slide.
Did we miss anything with the ones you skipped over?
No, or
Okay. We appreciate your alacrity.
Economic Development Division, I probably don't need to tell you that they've had a busy year. They've done so much COVID outreach. Next slide. They've also helped with the Maritime Task Force. They worked on the Affordable Housing Task Force. Also, this division developed the Annapolis Small Business Recovery Task Force report that involved input from over 500 businesses. They helped manage 11 recovery zones across the city and served as a key resource to business. They launched the Small Business Recovery Hub, Shop Local campaign that has helped small businesses especially during the winter months when things were very tight. Next slide. Some of their goals we had to modify due to COVID, but they still managed to do a lot of outreach to businesses virtually. Next slide. And our Shop, Dine, Stay Annapolis program was very successful. Next slide. I think Steve and Hope must be on Zoom even more than I am, meeting with businesses, solving problems, and getting information out there. Next slide. Their websites are a valuable warehouse of information for businesses. Whenever they hear about new county, state, federal opportunities for funding, that information is on the website. It is out on a newsflash. It is in their newsletter. So they've been doing a great job keeping our small businesses going. Next slide. Historic preservation. You know, this division reviews exterior changes in the historic district and administers our tax credit program and provides support to the HPC. Next slide. The tax credit program has been very successful this year, helping people receive city and state tax credits for work they've done, such as this property on Maryland Avenue that had to replace the roof, working hand in hand with our staff technical assistants on how to do that. Next slide. This division also worked closely with Senator Elfreth's office. Senator Elfreth was interested in honoring Maryland suffragettes. This picture is from the state archives. Our staff worked with Senator Elfreth, her chief of staff, and staff from the state archives to make sure this sign went up. This panoramic picture is going to go up in the right place on State Circle, working with some very supportive property owners who've helped us find a site for some interpretive signage. And we're very excited. This sign is almost through production. This photo. Next slide. Again, just providing technical assistance, working with owners. Next slide. And continuing to work with properties such as this on Duke of Gloucester, where there was the fire. We've been working with them all year to help restore this building. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to Maria to talk about Licenses and Permits Division.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Oh, good morning. The Permits and Licenses Division has had a lot of challenges in the last year, of course, due to the pandemic, since we are used to face-to-face communication with our contractors, but we have continued to do rental inspections virtually, and that seems to be working out very well. And we do the building inspections face-to-face. And I think that some of the contractors thought that we would be doing them virtually. So that has worked out well with one inspector. So we have 8,347 rental units in the city. And so we've been able to do those virtually. Next slide. We also had some challenges in issuing permits and taking in permits since the building is closed to the public. So we have provided a drop box, which is the tall box that you see, for people to put in large permits with large plans. We also have a tote for a pickup box because the USPS had some challenges in delivering mail. So permits were taking too long to get to people. So we allow them the option to either pick it up or we will mail it. Next slide. As you know, our very own Steve Andrews, building inspector, got Employee of the Year because he has been the only building inspector that has been working site for the last year. Very deserving. Next slide. We also are working to improve responses to our code complaints and violations. And we are working on that goal by doing some additional training. Next slide.
All right. Thank you, Maria.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
One of the sensitive inspections is for short-term rentals, and that continues to be an ongoing topic. We had some information submitted in support of a piece of legislation by Dr. Nash that had 2 points in time, February of 2020 and February of 2021. Is there any ability for us to get more discrete information? In particular, it's hard to decipher what has to do with seasonal, February, versus COVID. And it's really hard to determine. It looks, because the number of units active are down, that the legislation may have actually achieved some of its goals, but it's really hard to know without more discrete and continuous data. Is that under your purview?
I will say, and then I will turn it over to Sally, we are working with a program called Host Compliance that we hope will allow you to get more information about short-term rentals specifically. And Sally, you may want to add to that.
Right. It's been challenging with our system. It's pretty much impossible to get the kind of nuanced data you're looking for. For host compliance, we have a little bit more ability to do so, but there are also limitations to that data because it shows us, it focuses on active rental instead of what seems to be the case is we have a decent number of people with licenses who don't actually rent out their property with great frequency. But we also are just starting a new type, the Navy Boat Show license, MBS. And this license is free of charge, but you will have to pay taxes to have this license. So that will probably help us capture those people who are really only renting their house out for boat show and Navy graduation, but are showing up in our system as a license rental holder. So that will probably help us with that data.
Well, it would be helpful to get the number of people actually licensed to compare to the number of people who are active. I don't know what that data will show us. I suspect there are more people licensed than are active, but it's hard to know when we're doing the moratoria. It's hard to know who that's affecting. We just need to be able to get into the data a lot more to understand it and understand the impacts of our legislation.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Alderman Finlayson?
was that a question for Dr. Nash, or may I ask a question?
That was a request of Dr. Nash. And
Oh, okay.
I saw her taking notes. I didn't know that she was going to respond.
I've no
Okay.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Thank you. My question is for Ms. Brown. We have a growing number of rental housing units. Many of them, I think, at least in my ward, are not legal rentals. And there seems to be a move towards individuals buying multiple units and then, renting them out without the proper care, I'll say. First of all, are our requirements for rentals easily accessible on our website? And secondly, what standards are we using in our inspections of the rental units?
The answer to your question, yes, they are accessible on the website, both the application and also a brochure that gives information on what an owner has to do to rent out a unit. In addition, we do have a program where when we get notice that a particular address may be renting out, usually when we get that information is true, they're renting, we send them a rental application, and then we move forward with some with giving out a citation if we have to, if they refuse to either not rent or fill out the application and turn it in. So, oftentimes we don't know that somebody's renting until but once we find out, then we do investigate and we do go after them to apply for a legal rental license.
Okay, thank you. I need to go to the website and check that out. I've called Dr. Nash on a couple of occasions, and now I get to call you.
I was going to say, feel free to call me or send me an email, and
Okay.
I'll look into it. And we will send an application to the owner. And that is that we get a lot of units legal that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're on this general topic, and this is a question for Ms. Brown and Dr. Nash both. We're adding more and more code. We're talking about potentially changing in the maritime zones the composition of what percent is maritime, what percent is non-maritime. But I have a feeling that even with the current numbers, we have a lot of non-maritime activities going on. And so the council passes code, and it all is wonderful at the code level, but at the practice level, which means permits and inspections, I think we sometimes fall short. And so that brings up a resource question. If we're going to continue to have more and more things that are going to require permits and inspections, do we have the capability to actually carry out the code? It's a softball question.
Oh, is it? Okay. In that case, we need more people. We manage, I hear complaints about our enforcement. There's some things in the code that are really, really hard to enforce. We can't be everywhere all the time. We're not going to have a stakeout operation to catch someone illegally renting their house. We have to prioritize, and that means certain things don't come to our attention. And it's sort of a balance. I think we're doing okay right now balancing our efforts. If we do too much enforcement, you hear about that too. So, we try to be fair. We try to give people a chance to come into compliance. I think most people are willing to do that once they've been called out. Some people just don't even know that, what they're supposed to be doing. So we have pretty good success rates with that. But it just depends on how proactive you want us to be and how reactive you want us to be. So we tend to be more reactive, i.e. responding to complaints, just because that's the kind of workload our existing staff can manage right now.
That's a fair answer. And I know we're asking a lot of questions, so we're running long on this presentation, but I think the dialogue is very useful. Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just a note for us. Maybe we should consider adding to our legislation, like we have a fiscal impact note, we should add another statement or another option for consideration that speaks to whether it's doable. And if it is doable, what does it take to do it? So if we enact legislation that's going to require a different or increased staffing, let's say, then there should be a way for directors, department heads to tell us that if we enact this, then we need, this much staffing. And that hopefully will impact us in our decision making, because we should not be continuing to, approve legislation knowing that we don't have the staff to follow through. So just a note for the future. Thank you.
Right. I think you make a good point, Alderwoman, and perhaps that can be folded into the staff report, but I think it doesn't make sense for us to pass legislation that's not enforceable. And I know we have done that from time to time. So really, that's feedback that should be coming to us from the directors. And I think we've always been open to that when we've been made aware of it, but perhaps we need to reemphasize that we need that kind of input. All right, Dr. Nash, please proceed.
All right, thank you. These are our long-term goals. They're really our goals for our whole department. A lot of times it's several divisions working together on one of these goals. Next slide. So for example, this picture shows the project at 2010 West Street, affordable housing project, our current planning, economic development, community development, and our licenses and permits division all worked to get this project out of the ground and on its way. We've also worked together with HACA to help fund efforts like Newtown 20 and the Morris Blum rehabilitation. Next slide. We've been doing an amazing amount of virtual outreach through different formats, work sessions, surveys, especially a comprehensive planning division, but I think we are all getting to be pros at this now. Next slide. The economic development division has been working with other divisions and other agencies to help promote minority businesses, as Alderman Gay mentioned earlier. Also helping businesses transition to a post-COVID world, what that's going to look like. One of the agencies we've been working more with is Visit Annapolis. Steve is on their board and has played an important role in the selection of leadership and governance reforms there. I think it's really important to partner with these kinds of agencies where in the past we weren't always really coordinated with them and their goals, and now we're much more aligned, as well as organizations like the Downtown Annapolis Partnership, which we've always had a strong relationship with. Next slide. Cultural resources, we continue to work to protect the city's archaeological artifacts and consolidate and properly curate the artifacts that we have in storage now. Next slide. And to protect the city's fragile historic resources, I'm sorry, next slide, Julian, such as the Maynard Burgess House and which our staff has been working on with Public Works to make sure that that resource is protected into the future, and to also plan for the changes that we're going to be seeing downtown with the end of the state of emergency. The popularity of outdoor dining, we know restaurants are going to keep wanting to do that. And as we transition through the, with the City Dock Action Plan changes. Next slide. Continue to modernize our building code. We passed you passed, I should say, Ordinance 03820 in November, which updated our code to reference the latest International Building Code. Next slide. And now, since the Urban Forester has become part of the current planning division, there's been a great amount of synergy there. We have much better coordination now than ever before. We're going to be updating the street tree master plan, as I mentioned, and working together on the critical area MOU, which will help expand our opportunities for spending this money in meaningful and impactful ways. And environmental goals are a prominent part of the comprehensive plan. And Eric has been working very hard with the Environmental Commission and other groups to make sure that this stays at the forefront of the comp plan. Next slide. Just some budget highlights. We have a reduction from last year's spending. Even though I'm asking for a little bit more money for trees, I kept most things level. Next slide. This shows our major accomplishments, which I've already referenced throughout the presentation, but are here for your reference. All right, next slide. And thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Wow. Thank you. Are there questions from the committee and then questions from the council? Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't lower my hand from the last time. Dr. Nash, do you have any statistics on home ownership? I believe our percentage of home ownership has declined over the last 20 years or so. But do we have an idea, or maybe that's something Mr. Rice knows? I don't know.
It's about 50%.
50% home ownership and 50% rentals. And can you tell me how much that has declined over the last 20 years?
I don't know the exact amount, but I know it has declined in the past 20 years. And I know the county is much closer to 80% home ownership.
Okay, so are we doing anything to get ourselves back to a higher level of home ownership, i.e. programs or, whatever?
We have several programs to help homeowners, first-time homeowners, for things like down payment assistance. But as I mentioned, it's been very challenging this year because of the existing inventory is so small. So we have been struggling with that. We work with Habitat for Humanity to purchase vacant structures to build or rehabilitate structures, but there just hasn't been any inventory this year. So it's definitely a challenge. I think with the assistance of this new position, we'll be able to focus on our efforts a little bit more, but it is definitely a challenge right now.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to send you a text shortly about another issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Percent home ownership can change for two reasons. So one is that the actual number of homeowners goes down. The other is that we have an increase in developing rental properties, which would also change that. And I think this is an issue that's going to be very a hot topic in the comp plan when we talk about increasing density in order to afford more affordable housing. Affordable housing isn't just home ownership, as you know. It could also be an affordable place to rent. So it's a really complicated topic, and I know Dewan's committee has gotten into that a lot in their discussions. So that'll be a topical time to discuss when we get into the comp plans. Alderwoman Tierney, and thank you for the last image you sent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Sally, I have to say it again. I say it anytime I can, is that your efficiency during COVID in processing all those permits and all should be commended. And I know that I'm sure that the city manager agrees with me. Anyways, my question is trees. Trees. when you have a reforestation budget that basically got depleted because we don't do fee in lieu of. In fact, it's like negative. So is that separate than what we use to plant trees in the city? I mean, are we in trouble here? Is that a softball question? I'm not sure, but.
So we have a couple of different sources of money. We have the reforestation fee. We do accept fee and lieu. It's just we encourage people to plant on site first.
Oh, right. I'm thinking of MPDUs. Yeah, so trees we still
really
do.
encourage the on-site planting first. But we will accept fees if it comes to that. And then there's money also in planning and zoning's operating budget and contractual services for work like tree maintenance, tree planting, and the program I showed you a slide of that monitors our urban tree canopy. So
so there's money.
Like
so there's money elsewhere to cover this negative. And my last question is on the HPC department. Have we addressed the coverage, for lack of a better word, that we will need on the redevelopment being done within the historic district and the respective reviews, and also obtaining ownership of some of these, properties, as you mentioned, the Maynard Burgess House. Do we have the staff to manage those properties and that redevelopment as it relates to HPC review?
I know Roberta and John have spent a lot of time on that. They're very focused on Maynard Burgess and making sure that it's treated the way a fragile historic resource needs to be treated. And that can be expensive and complicated, and it almost merits yet another staff person. I could use what David is glaring at me.
I know.
But, so that could theoretically be a part-time position to manage the city's historic structures that we do have. But Roberta and John have such a deep store of technical knowledge. They do an amazing job with the resources we have here. So, we're managing okay.
Yeah, and maybe it's an opportunity for a grant specific to that. Okay, thank you very much.
I had Alderman Pendle Charles, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Just want to acknowledge and say, Dr. Nash, you've really, really promoted planning and zoning in a way that I don't think many of us could have imagined at this point in this short period of time that you've been our director since, I think it was February of last year. So thank you so very much. And I really do appreciate the meetings we've had with Ms. Wellman, as well as the city manager, concerning the historical amenities that we want to continue and move ahead with in Ward 3 especially. My goal, and someone asked me the other day, is to make Ward 3 a tourist destination because I think, it's worthy of it. We have enough there to do it. And I'm looking forward to working with our city moving forward with that. But thank you so very much. Appreciate everything today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Seeing no hands, Dr. Nash, thank you very much for the presentation. You had a lot of background information that wasn't in the slides. I didn't look closely at the blocks you had for your performance, but I thought those were very helpful. I don't know that those are things that you can make available to us as a supplement to the presentation, but there was an awful lot that you gave us that wasn't on the screen, but really does bring forward the level of effort that's going on in planning and zoning. So if that's something you can share in some way, I think would be helpful to the council when we do our budget deliberations.
Will do.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Dr. Nash didn't want to leave out Mr. Eric, who's been extraordinary as well. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to all my staff.
Yes, absolutely.
Alderman Payam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies. I've had a couple of issues that I've had to deal with in my capacity, other capacity as an alderman here in Ward 2, and I apologize for not participating more. But I've gone through the, the finances here in the budget outline that we've been presented with, and there's simply not a lot to question here. I mean, no radical departures from last year, no, huge percentage increases in salaries or other things like that. So it's a double reason for my being quiet. I know, much to everybody's eternal gratitude, everybody will be eternally grateful for that, but don't count on it happening very often again. But thank you, Dr. Nash, for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were counting our blessings, Fred, but we're sure you'll make up for it. Again, Dr. Nash, thank you. And I think we're ready now to move on, if the committee is ready for presentation from the police department.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nobody's home.
I'm all the way up. Okay, I see we're on, so I'm going to come upstairs. All right. Bye.
Just let me know when I'm ready.
We know you're ready, so proceed, please.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Before I get started, I want to make a few comments. It won't be long, but I want to preface my presentation with some remarks that's been on my heart for quite some time. And first of all, I want to continue to offer my prayers and condolences to the George Floyd family. I pray, it's my prayer that this verdict rendered yesterday grants them peace. I pray for the citizens of Minneapolis, the state of Minnesota. I pray for the community. I also pray for the law enforcement officers who go out bravely each and every day, most of which serve honorably and really want to make a difference in the lives of the people that they took the oath to protect. I also want to pray for the city of Annapolis. I want to pray for Baltimore. I want to pray for Los Angeles, California, Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, and all the cities that are struggling with violence and struggling to survive each and every day. But I'll say this before I get into the budget. This budget will kind of do the best that we can to reimagine policing and to be the type of police department that the community has faith and trust in. I said to my men and women last night, that we're in for some very tough times in America. One of the things that I want to preface also say before I get into my presentation, that police reform is one thing, but we'll never get past having the type of communities that we all, I believe, in my heart, that we all want to see if we don't deal with the legacy of racism in its most pure form. Criminal justice will never actualize itself, good criminal justice, until we deal with economic justice, until we deal with educational justice, until we deal with what causes alcoholism, alcohol dependence, drug addiction, the disease of drug addiction, broken families, hopelessness. None of those things are police issues. Those are societal issues. The problem has been historically that men and women have been asked to go into these communities and keep the peace when those things haven't been addressed. So I just, my heart goes out to the George Floyd family. I know, I can't imagine. I'm a parent. I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm all those things, just like each and every one of you are. So I know that this verdict doesn't bring George Floyd back, but I hope that this is the beginning to have a real debate and a real discourse on what we need to do to transform America, but it has to go way beyond policing. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to the men and women.
I'm glad you got to meet Tricia. Yes.
I want to give a shout out, lastly, to the men and women of the Annapolis PD. Throughout this year, we faced the pandemic, we faced police reform, we faced protests, and we've had to endure a lot of challenges. And through it all, I'm proud to say that there was not one major incident that brought discredit upon the Annapolis Police Department. So I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the wonderful performance that the Annapolis Police, the men and women who served the Annapolis Police Department engaged in during this very, very challenging year. I try to lead by example. I don't work from home. I come to 199 Taylor Avenue each and every day, along with my Deputy Chief, Stanley Bradford, and all the men and women, in spite of COVID-19 infections, and spite of limited resources and all the other challenges, the men and women have bravely come out into the communities and did their very best to make sure that Annapolis remains safe. So having said that, thank you for indulging me and giving me an opportunity to say what was on my mind and what's on my heart. So having said that, our presentation today, of course, it deals with the budget. It talks about the structure and the actions and the 2021 accomplishments. We've reimagined or restated our vision. It'll talk about our strategic goals, our new goals, and of course, how we're going to accomplish that if it's the will of the council to approve the 2022 budget. You can advance the slide. Okay, I'll start off by the Annapolis Police Department's vision. The vision is the Annapolis Police Department shall be an impartial and just partner to every citizen it serves, vigorously enforcing the law constitutionally. That's very important to me, to protect its residents and others. We shall operate effectively, efficiently, ethically, and equitably, focused on community relationships. We shall exercise careful and faithful stewardship over the authority and economy given to us by the people. We shall earn and keep community trust, recognizing the department is more than merely a peacekeeping force. We will be a guide to those seeking pathways out of the criminal justice system, a helping hand to the homeless, the hungry, the mentally ill, and underprivileged. We shall be a listener to those seeking to be heard and a beacon of officer safety and wellness. We shall evolve from the Annapolis Police Department to the Annapolis Community Police Department. Advance the next slide, please. Okay, the Annapolis Police Department's organizational structure. We have several vacancies, as most of you know. Myself and my Deputy Chief, and now that Rhonda McCoy is on board, as well as my Deputy Chief, Stanley Bradford, we are trying to reorganize the Annapolis Police Department to meet the demands and meet the expectations of both the council, the mayor, and the citizens that we serve. So we'll start off by, at the top of the presentation, is the Officer of the Chief. And then we have our Patrol Division, our Special Operations Division, our Administrative Division. Personnel detail, a breakdown of how the Annapolis Police Department is constructed, which is still a work in progress, I may add. Definitely still a work in progress. But as we stand now, we have the Office of the Chief, and in that office, we have 9 sworn personnel, and we have 2 civilians. The Administrative Division of the Police Department, we have 12 sworn people and 25 civilians. And then we have the Special Operations Division, and that consists of 47 sworn, 3 civilian. And then we have our patrol division, which has 47 sworn and no civilians in our patrol forces. Okay, now I'd like to talk about our 2021 fiscal accomplishments. If you go to my left, and I don't know if it's your right, but the orange box, we were awarded 10 state and federal grants totaling $1.3 million that alleviates the city from covering expenses of important departmental initiatives and functions, I should add. Of note, we received a $17,200 grant from the Department of Justice that covers the cost of the trailer used for community events. A $20,000 grant that covered the cost of a safety initiative following the insurrection in Washington, D.C., a state grant that allowed the city to upgrade cameras in the Robinwood community. I don't know if I know I'm partly blind, but I don't know if I'm colorblind, but I see it as purple. Launched a new computer-aided dispatch system that went up about 2.5 weeks ago or so. So we're proud to say that we now have the new computer-aided dispatch system, commonly referred to as CAD, with upgraded technologies to meet state and federal mandates, allowing dispatchers to prioritize calls and identify the status of our officers in the field more effectively. It has a GPA system so we can track officers. So if an officer is unable to get to his or her radio, our dispatcher can look exactly where they are and get them the help they need without the officer having to key their mic to get to send the transmission. So if an officer is in distress, wrestling with a very dangerous individual and can't get to their radio and won't acknowledge, then the dispatcher can look at their screen and identify exactly where the officer is so we can get them to help. I'm so happy that we have CAD. It does everything. It has a hazard file so we can start databasing information. For example, if a particular residence is known to be violent, the officers will have the foreknowledge before they even arrive at the scene to prepare so that we can de-escalate, do things like de-escalate as opposed to walking in to a lot of these situations not knowing what to expect. Now, in order for us to know that, we have to have a history with that individual address and kind of know, because some neighborhoods and some communities do have problem people, unfortunately. And regardless of who is responding, the dispatcher can give them hazard warnings as to what to expect when we get there. So I'm really happy on so many levels. I can talk about the CAD system for quite a while.
Mr. Chair, are you doing questions down or at the end?
I would like to, but whatever your will is, I'd like to get through the slides first. It's not that many, and then we can go back and identify anything that you have a question, if you don't mind.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
The next one is the green. Oh, can we go back to the green box? I'm sorry, I like to highlight all these. I'll run through these quickly. We decreased overall crime by 10% while decreasing the amount of overtime funds spent for the 2021 budget. The next one, the blue box. I'm sorry. I like to go back to the blue box, if you will. I'm sorry. I think this is important. The blue box, we launched reentry program to decrease recidivism, expanding staffing and include the hire of a community resident and establish key community partnerships with local non-government organizations, county, and state agencies. The reentry program, of course, has been one of the most pleasant surprises, headed up by Robert Horn, Danette Smikle, also with Bishop Carroll and many other partners. We're doing some wonderful things for the residents of Annapolis, and we're taking away the opportunity for, of course, you know what the word recidivism means, to be repeat offenders. So we're trying to take away the opportunity for people who are coming back from both short and long-term periods of incarceration to reoffend. We can go to the next box real quick. We planned, trained, and have a launch date for Kronos management software, utilizing technology to increase efficiency and streamline administration. The Kronos was just put up when I got here. The former Deputy Chief, Paul Herman, had briefed me about the Kronos, but we had problems with the bandwidth to accommodate it. But I'm proud to say that now that's up and running. We can go to the next box. I think it's the red box. And we opened the community to, of course, the 2 community resource centers, the partnership that we have with the Housing Authority for the City of Annapolis, HACA, to strengthen departmental ties and build stronger relationships with residents in those areas. And of course, we all know, I know the council is very familiar with what we are hoping to accomplish beyond just police officers having a presence, to provide services for residents in that neighborhood to help them to transition from poverty and hopelessness to job training and other opportunities that will make their quality of life much better. And each center was open at a minimal increase to the budget, with a minimal increase. I think that's all of the boxes, so we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Major McCoy. I keep calling you Major McCoy, but thank you, Rhonda, with the R-O-N, Rhonda. Investigations and community engagements. We solved 3 homicides and made 7 arrests during this past fiscal year in reference to the cases. We engaged to assist the community with over 600 events during the height of the pandemic. And we had done, when I first arrived here, Lieutenant Krause had told me of the many events they've participated in and facilitated involving young people, the movie nights, the fishing trips, all the different types of expeditions that they've exposed young men and women, and particularly in public housing, who have never had the opportunity to experience the water or to see the latest movies or to be in a safe environment with our members so that they can enjoy an evening without worrying about being caught in the crossfire or being exposed to traumatic events. And so I'm very proud of the work that Kevin Krause and Patty Norris and all the other people in community relations has done over the years. We solved 7 of the attempted homicides that occurred in fiscal year. That's pretty high. That's way above the national average. The national average is around 52%. We solved 71% of the attempted murders, mostly involving handguns. And we seized over 30 illegal firearms during the fiscal year. One of the incidents that I'm most proud of that happened very recently at the beginning of the year, when our officers, one of which was a net officer that was in the vicinity of Tyler Avenue and Forest Drive, when some individuals pulled up in vehicles with about 4 guns locked and loaded and ready to engage. And because of the information we received from a citizen, our officers were able to intervene, seize the vehicle and the guns constitutionally, made arrest, and prevented what probably would have been a very, very horrific shooting event. But we were able to intervene and solve that. And I plan to acknowledge those officers for their great work at a later time. Thank you. You can advance the next slide. The agency interactions and partnerships. These are our internal and external interactions. We coordinated, planned emergency response incidents with the office, with the Annapolis Fire Department, with the Office of Emergency Management, and the Anne Arundel County Police Department. Of course, we all know with the Anne Arundel County Police Department, one of our marquee programs and partnerships is the Crisis Intervention Team, the Crisis Mobile Team with Jane Corbin and Lieutenant Steve Thomas, who heads that. And of course, you know, with my partners, Chief Doug Romali and Chief Kevin Simmons have been wonderful dealing with the opioid crisis and the response that's required to make sure that we save as many lives as we can. I know that the opioid crisis has been horrific. Everything's laced with fentanyl. There's a lot of mixtures with narcotics that prove to be deadly on the front end, but we're doing our very best with everything from testing strips to Narcan and naloxone and all the other things that are at our disposal, both our sworn members And many of our civilian and contractual employees are trained and ready to, if they encounter somebody in distress as a result of an overdose, to make every effort to save their life. The next one is a piece of the puzzle is to review traffic and adequate public facilities plans with the Department of Zoning and Planning, or Planning and Zoning, Recreation and Parks, and OCM in support of the city's economic development strategies. Of course, one of our challenges still the number of officers that we have to meet the requirement in local ordinance of the adequate public facilities. We still fall below the 3.2 per 1,000 ratio, but we're going to work with your support to try to bring that up to the requirement that the code mandates as soon as possible. We also partnered with the AACHD, the Anne Arundel County Health Department, AA County Schools, and the Governor's Office on Crime Control and Prevention. GOCAP is what we commonly refer to it as, and the health department, I can't say enough about them. They've been really a very supportive partner in the prevention and participating. I personally participate in many boards that target social inequities and crime plan strategies. I'm using my platform now. I'm going through the leadership Anne Arundel County. I'm actually a participant, a student, and one of the projects that I agreed to participate on is to develop a plan, a strategic plan to help support Vanessa Bright in her quest to provide job opportunities through her car washing, her power washing business, to help employ young men and women who are recently returned from short and long periods of incarceration. So I'm really excited about that, and I'll talk about that in the near future. Myself and my classmates in the leadership Anne Arundel County are putting together a comprehensive plan to try to garner support, financial support, to help Vanessa Bright get that business up and running. And then, of course, we partnered with a federal task force that address organized crime, illegal firearms, narcotic sales, distribution, and collaborate with the Maryland State Crime Prevention to plan events and respond to incidents. One of the things I'd like to talk about real quick with that is that about 6 months ago, I convened a meeting with the top brass at the federal level, Special Agent in Charge, the U.S. Attorney for the Baltimore region, the Maryland State Police. I mean, we had everybody in the room right here at 199 Taylor Avenue, both our state and federal partners under one room. It was really impressive. And we talked about the problems of Annapolis. Mainly, Annapolis has become a pretty interesting hiding place. Of course, we've identified human trafficking coming through here with our federal partners. And we've done many other things. I had one detective assigned to the HIDTA task force. We have a sergeant assigned to the FBI intelligence and gang unit to deal with organized crime. And we're forging a lot of partnerships that's not talked about on a daily basis. About 2 weeks ago, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the United States Marshal Services, and they're now helping us to assist my men and women who are trying to track down wanted people, everything from gun trafficking to drugs to attempted murder. As a matter of fact, the United States Marshal is assisting us in looking for a suspect that we have identified and wrote a warrant for his arrest for the murder that occurred a couple of weeks ago in the city of Annapolis that occurred at Newtown Drive. We're looking for a gentleman by the name of Izzy, and I hope that with the help of our federal partners, our state partners, the Baltimore Police, that we will eventually bring this young man into custody, and he will be charged with first-degree murder amongst other charges. The next slide, please. Here are some of our strategic goals. We had Bob Watkins, who is a resident and a member of my advisory team. He worked with my command staff. This is when Paul Herman was still my deputy chief, along with my current deputy chief, Stan Bradford, Bob Watkins sat down and helped us to put together a strategic plan. At the core of our strategic goals is to build safety, to establish safety, build trust, excellence, and optimize our resource management. I have no illusions as the chief of police here in the city of Annapolis that we're under some pretty tight fiscal constraints, but we need to have an operating cost at least adequate enough to provide the kind of public safety to all residents. We talk about a lot of times in our discourse the problems in public housing and subsidized housing, but all Annapolitans deserve and should expect that at any time we can respond to the needs of other communities whose problems and concerns may not be the same concerns that we have in other parts of the city. But at the end of the day, everybody should expect that their police department responds to their needs, regardless of race, ethnicity, social status, economic status, and political influence. Everybody has a right to expect that when they call us for our services that we'll meet that need. And so we're trying to optimize our resource management so that we can continue to accomplish that. Our goals create security conditions which make Annapolis residents and visitors feel safe and enable a strong and cohesive community. Just to elaborate on that, I've argued since I've been here, community policing is so important. It's not one definition that describes community policing. I'm often asked, what is community policing? It's just that, it's police working with the community, simple as that. I mean, there's many variations of what people expect out of community policing, but at the core of it, as long as we can establish that the police and the community are constantly working with one another to solve problems. And those problems, of course, are too voluminous or too large to mention, but anything that affects overall quality of life, even those things that we do in Annapolis that many agencies don't do. I know for an absolute fact, I've been in this business 40 years, we address issues in the city of Annapolis that are not really police issues, but to be good partners and be good citizens and to be a department that establishes trust. We do some things that we just do as an act of goodwill. We're not legally obliged to do it. It's not a part of the oath of our office. We do it because we want the community to know that we are stable and we're willing to assist and give the best advice that we can give and partner with as many community organizations as possible. So our performance measure, of course, at the core of what we do is to prevent crime. Part of crime prevention is to reduce overall crime. Our benchmark is monthly reduction of crime rates by category. Most of you are familiar with the term Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. Part 1 crimes, which I'll talk about in a minute, is established by the FBI. The short version of the definition is a clearinghouse run by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It establishes we index the crime according to category. The first category of Part 1. There are 8 Part 1 crimes. 4 crimes against persons, 4 crimes against property. The crimes against persons is criminal homicide. There's many forms of criminal homicide. Murder and homicide are not the same thing. Homicide is the killing of one person by another. It can be justified. That's all that homicide means. It becomes a problem for law enforcement in the criminal justice system when it's criminal homicide to include murder and manslaughter. The next category of Part 1 crimes are rapes. And rapes now have been reclassified by the FBI. It used to be carnal knowledge. That means that there had to be a penetration by the penis into the vagina. But the definition of rape has been reclassified now. Any penetration, man or woman. It used to be a crime just against women, but now rape can be defined as a crime against a male or a female. That's the second category of crimes against persons. The third one is aggravated assault. And that's any assault where serious bodily injury or death can occur. It could be physical harm or it could be the threat. Somebody points a gun at you, that's an aggravated assault according to the Federal Bureau's Uniform Crime Reports. And then the last one in the crimes against persons is robbery, unarmed and armed robbery, strong arm robbery, where a person takes your possessions by using their hands or physical force. The other one, armed robbery, of course, it has to be, example, a knife or a weapon present under aggravating circumstances. Then the 4 property crimes that the first one is burglary. Of course, that's the unlawful entry in the person's house with the intention to do harm. The second one is theft. Or larceny. Larceny is an old English term. I'm going back to my professor days now, but theft. And of course, that's taking property that doesn't belong to you. That's the second one. The third one is motor vehicle theft. That's just strictly the stealing of a vehicle. And then the eighth and last one in the property category is arson. And that was added in 1979, just a little bit of history to the UCR. And those are the crimes that we're pretty much measured by. Part 2 crimes are all other crimes other than part 1s. And so our benchmark is to make sure that our 8 index crimes are kept at a minimum, because those are the type of crimes that affect the overall quality of life of most residents. And our objectives are to create crime control initiatives and social programs to target violent crimes and address recidivism or repeat offenders. Next slide, please.
Chief, can I interrupt? The presentations are supposed to follow the performance measures. I see here what the different categories are, but I don't see any measures. Do we have any numbers that show us where we were and where we are now?
Yes, sir. I'm almost finished my slide, I promise you. Then I'll have statistics of where we were numerically as opposed to where we were last year, where we are this year as opposed to where we were last year. And that's in those categories I just explained. So I will have some numbers to give you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, okay. The number of community events hosted or attended, those are some other metrics in each ward. Benchmarks, we have numbers for that. Host or attended at least one outreach event in each ward every month. These are what we hope to achieve, and ensure that there's a planned event sponsored by the department that addresses community concern and forges collaboration. So I'll speed this up a little bit because we're almost finished. Can you advance the next slide, please? Okay, another goal, achieve and sustain organizational excellence. And of course, performance metrics, percentage of compliance on internal inspection criteria. A benchmark will be 100% compliance. The goal is to be in compliance with an internal inspection criteria, but the benchmark is 100% compliance. That's what we hope to achieve. And our objectives is to be prepared for and pass internal and external compliance audits for certification and inspections. That includes CLIA, and that's the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We have benchmarks that we have to do. Of course, we know that I'm proud to say that Annapolis is accredited by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. You can advance the next slide, please. Another goal, to strengthen our workforce and optimize resources and management. Our performance measures or metrics is to demonstrate return on investments in personnel, equipment, and infrastructure expenditures. The benchmark effectiveness of personnel, equipment, and infrastructure compared to resources spent. The objective is to ensure efficient utilization of equipment and infrastructure and effective stewardship over funding. Next slide, please. Long-term goals, fully integrate the 6 pillars of 21st century policing model to take a social approach to crime prevention while maintaining core commitment to provide public safety through enforcement of criminal statutes and apprehended violent offenders. We wanted to establish diversity within the police department to demonstrate that we value all people, regardless of what their race or ethnicity is. To reorganize and redirect, the third bullet, resources to align with agencies' direction towards a community policing philosophy. And then we want to collaborate with institutions of higher learning to educate our staff and study police and community interactions. Now for the 2022 budget and the 2022 enhancements, I should say. Of course, FY 2021 salary and benefits totaled the amount of In fact, I'll do this to speed this up. Rhonda, are you on the air? That'll expedite it because they can explain it more fluently than I can. If Dave Maguez is on the air, can you run through the slide for me, please?
Okay, so you can see, let's see. So from where we were, I mean, you can see the variations from FY20, what we originally budgeted for, and adjusted for 21, are projected for the rest of this year, coming in under that adjusted budget, and then are proposed for next year obviously for the various categories. We ended up moving some amounts from certain accounts to ones where we thought it was more appropriate. Things that last year fell under contract services, for example, we put into software, which is under capital outlay. And so that explains some of the differences between years up to this year. And there was only a couple items that we had in capital outlay that were not in last year's budget. But the majority of this difference that you see down in capital outlay is just pulling things from contractual services and moving them down into accounts that are grouped under capital outlay.
The majority of that is software.
Yeah, the majority of that is software. Do you want to go on from here?
Yep.
The two enhancements that we put in for next year.
1 second, please.
Yes.
Alderman Payon had a question. Could we go back to that slide, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand. Salaries are up 13.5%. Tell me again what that's for. I mean, it's $2.5 million, right? And you know, if it's just pay raises or new people, I'd like to know. Otherwise, I don't really understand why it's so much higher. Most of us don't 13.5% pay raises.
Alderman Payon, which two columns are you comparing to when you're saying there's a 13% increase?
You better mean than I.
Well, I'm comparing the column on the left with the column on the far right.
Are you talking about the far left or the far right? The near left. I'm sorry.
About both the far left and the far right.
When you calculated 13%, which two columns are you comparing?
I'm sorry?
When you are calculating 13%, which two columns are you comparing?
The one on the far left and the one on the far right.
Well, so that's 2 years difference.
That's
there.
right.
And so two years worth of pay raises and 2 years worth of those pension increases. And in the 2 years from 20 to 22, pension went from 22% of salary to almost 35% of salary. Okay. So that's going to be around $1 million of that increase.
All right, that's much more reasonable. There's nothing about pensions.
No, Fred, no. Because if you do the division for projected fiscal 21 into proposed 22, you get the same 13%. So, I mean, I think this really gets at the heart of the budgeting or over budgeting, because it seems to be a trend that we will budget and then the numbers go down, down, down. And so there's no reason, particularly in a COVID year, why actual 2021 as projected should be lower than actual 2020. You would think it would be higher. It has all of the same contributions to the pension plan in there.
Yes. So I will add that we are doing an analysis for you to get you through these increases. Because remember, we have adjusted the 21 projected is lower than it normally would be because we have taken police salaries and moved them to the CARES grant. So if you add those up over time, that 21 projected amount has been reduced below what you would normally see when you don't have CARES funding covering some of it. We take those expenses. So I am doing a complete analysis of all of these columns so you'll understand what the differences are. And so you're comparing apples to apples to apples to apples for every column. So you know what the real increase is and explaining the real increase.
Yes, actually the figures that I had was the 16,817,400, the fiscal year 2021 projected budget with the 22 when I said 13.5%. Now there's nothing in there that says pensions are included. And I agree with you. If they're included an extra $1 million, then the figure I think is much more reasonable. So.
And 21 is reduced by things that won't impact 22. So I just want to say that is abnormally low for a reason. And those are the things I want to show you when we give you the analysis.
Okay.
But you will find that the police department, we gave them a certain amount of turnover in their budget and reduced their budget for salaries for turnover, but they have exceeded that and they have more vacancy savings than we put in the budget. So that is also a cause of this variance, is that they're still not filling the positions that we give them the funding for. So
the other figure I had a problem with was the supplies and other. You know, it's 273,100 last year, 702,500 this year. That's a 280% increase. Obviously, we bought some things that may or may not fit under supplies.
And that's what Dave McGuess was just explaining. They have been charging things to contractual services that needed to be placed into other line items, not contractual services. So we've split those into the other categories. So when you analyze their non-salary and benefits budget, you probably should take all three of those lines together when you're doing that. Then you will note that they have several capital outlay items that we added to the budget near the end process. And I think Dave would have a list of those, and so would Katie, would have a detailed list of what those extra items were. And it was a couple $100,000, I believe.
Okay. Do we have a list somewhere of what those items are?
The capital outlay items?
Yeah, the extra items that we added at the end of the budget.
No, I haven't mentioned capital outlay. Supplies and other is what I'm talking about.
Yes, but what I'm saying is we've shifted some things out of contractual services to both of those other two categories. Correct, Katie?
That's correct.
So if you look at contractual services, you'll see it's going way down. That's because we moved some of those expenses into the other categories. So we can provide you a list of the new things that are in this budget versus the continual expense.
Well,
the
it's
continuing expense of their other items.
Gone down 300,000, whereas supplies have gone up 400 and close to 450, and the capital outlay has gone up 495. They've gone up way past contractual. Much more than contractual.
Yes, and there are several new items in the budget, which we can provide you a list of.
Okay.
Are these items in OpenGov? So when we click on the thing, it'll break it out into more detail?
Probably not the detail level that you would want, but the contractual services breakdown is included on page 77 in the budget book.
Well, hopefully I'll get better looking at looking at that this afternoon when I talk with, meet with Katie. The one other item that was a little bit out of kilter, and I think it's as a result of a Supreme Court ruling, but the forfeitures figures are down 80%. Is that strictly because of the Supreme Court ruling that really cut back on what we can seize? Somebody?
I'll defer to APD to answer that question.
Okay, what?
On what page of the forfeiture?
Well, I can come back to that. We haven't.
Alderman Payon, I think that they are trying to find their unmute button there so they can answer a question. Is that true, Dave? It's like they're trying to do something to the computer to answer your question. I will say what we do as far as the FY22 budget is we give them budget appropriations that will cover everything they have on deposit, everything that we have in existence in the fund balance, plus any new revenue that they anticipate getting in this year. So whether or not the new year's revenue is less because of some decision that they help you with.
Yes, Alderman Payne, sorry. Yes, it's been over at least a few years now that seizures have gone down, and so forfeitures have gone down as well, mainly at the state level, somewhat at the federal level, but our seizures and as a result forfeitures have shifted to being predominantly from the federal level and getting very, very little from the state level.
Okay. I can understand that one. Thank you.
If I could continue though, two questions. One, I see the breakdown of contract services on page 77. Since I'm not able to be at home, I don't have last year's book. Do we have a similar breakdown in last year's binder?
Yes.
Okay, so we can compare. Then there are some categories like $55,000 for radio frequency. It doesn't really tell us very much. That's not a small amount of money. What does radio frequency mean?
So all of our radio communications, we pay for the use of the county's radio system. So towers, transmission lines. And so we pay them annually to be able to use those communications infrastructures.
Okay, thank you. That makes that clearer.
Chairman, I'm sorry. I just want to add, you can compare what's in last year's book, but just remember that they've reorganized a lot of their accounts to match how they should properly be recorded. So it's not going to be apples to apples like Jody and Dave mentioned.
This is beginning to sound like now you see it, now you don't. Alderwoman Mason, you had a question?
I have several questions. I wanted to get my hand up before, but I'd like the chief to finish his presentation and then I'll ask my questions, please.
All right, are there any other questions on this table from council members? If not,
I do.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, thank you. I think the public is looking at this and probably this meeting. So I think it's really important that we understand, because I don't understand it enough to explain it to constituents, that the projected of 2021 and the transfer, as you said, because of COVID money. Are you going to show COVID money distribution or allocations, the positives where you're taking out the negatives? This has to be asterisked somehow. And I know you know that. And then just as an aside, just so that so that we know the expansion of police duties, APD is currently at State Circle examining old bones that were discovered. So anyways, sort of jack of all trades. But anyways, if you could address that, Jody, seriously, that you had mentioned that the reduction was due to COVID funding.
That is part of the reason for the variance, is that we have reduced the adjusted budget. And that I will tell you, this column that says FY21 projected budget is misnamed in a way. It's FY21 projected actual. It's what they're projecting to spend.
Right.
And we have adjusted the budget downward and the 21 actual expenses downward because we have removed the budget and the actual from their general fund org and accounts and moved those expenses to the grant fund where we're accounting for the CARES money. We take the expenses out of the general fund and move them to the other fund. So you're not seeing them here. That's part of it. Part of it is actual additional vacancies that you will see that they have experienced actual vacancy savings substantially higher than what we had in the budget. And that is a major portion of this change, in that the 19 million that we put in for 22 has all their positions, and we total up all their salaries and benefits. And then we gave the same vacancy allocation as we did for 21.
Okay.
But they're experiencing a higher vacancy savings, a much higher vacancy savings. So that's a big part of this.
Yeah,
so when I do my analysis and tell you, try to get this to an apples to apples comparison for you, you will see all those components, the CARES expenses that have been moved out. And what components are vacancy savings and what components are increases to the pension contribution rate and what is related to the COLA and what is related to steps that are coming up. I'll try to and put that all in an analysis for you so you can see the different pieces that's causing this.
I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying
I'm just trying to explain it carefully.
Any layperson will look at this and say very simply, gee, if we're projecting 10.6,
right.
If we're projecting, right, so we go back down.
It is confusing. Confusing.
Well, so good luck showing us that.
I think it gives an unfair presentation of the police budget. I mean, people will quickly go and see 13 and 14% increases because they do the same calculation Alderman Payon did, either using 2020 actual or 2021 projected, and it shows gigantic increases, which is really not the right information to convey. I think if we get that 2021 column replenished with the monies that are transferred to CARES and some of the other things, I think we'd have a more accurate representation of the increase 22 over 21. But you're working on that, so we'll wait to get that.
The information we have at this point.
That is correct. So let us, if we can, get back on track as Alderwoman Finlayson suggested and see the rest of the presentation.
If I could just real quick before we move on, in response to that, Alderman Arnett, if you're looking at the middle column, the FY 2021 adjusted budget compared to 22 proposed budget, just in the three categories, as Director Dickinson mentioned, not salary related, so just contractual services, supplies and other, and capital outlay. The difference is for 2022, there's an additional 148,500. If that's any helpful, to just kind of gauge the difference in our operating as opposed to the entire budget.
And we also want to say, Alderman Payon Arnett, Finlayson, and Tierney, that this budget was prepared well in advance of the new laws that will take effect, some of it in 1 October, which will, they have a fiscal impact. One thing that, that we can say for certain is that it will change our officer assistance program and, and training, and there will more likely be additional costs as a result of the legislation. We just want to make mention of that.
Yeah, I understand that. I think what we're striving for, I will just say I'm striving for, is a more fair, balanced presentation of the growth in the budget 22 over 21. And I think the pointing out using the fiscal 21 adjusted budget to the proposed 22 might be the more appropriate apples and oranges comparison. And in that case, salaries and benefits go up by 4.3%, not 13 point something. So remember, the public is looking at these things along with the council, and we want to make sure they're seeing the accurate picture as well as we ourselves see that. So I think we're looking forward to the new tables that Director Dickinson will give us to sort of get an apples to apples comparison. So if we can move on.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay, no, I'll wait.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Chief, that's all you, sir.
So we had.
Oh, I'm sorry, that is me. So the enhancements, so we have our evidence storage room here at the police department was designed with the renovation of the police department back in the early 2000s. We continue pretty much every year with an increase in evidence that we are collecting and storing. And with the amount coming in, it's challenging to get through and process items for disposal. So one of the enhancements that we put in for was additional shelving, similar to what we currently have. We currently have electronic moving shelving, but what we put in for was manual, so the cost was less. And then also the other enhancement for upgrades to our crime scene processing unit in order to bring it up to industry standards, as well as a certification that we need in order to support evidence analysis and prosecution of cases. We need to have separate rooms where we are processing evidence from different people in during incidents. And so we've gotten quotes on that, and we put in an enhancement for that consistent with the quotes that we got. And those are the only two things that that we put in for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Floor is opened up for the chief to answer questions.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief, and your entire staff. I have a litany of questions because I've been holding and taking notes and waiting until you finished. And my questions range from minor to major, in no specific order. First question, our cadets program. Is that going to be returned?
Yes, ma'am. We have one cadet, I believe, left, and we definitely want to not only fill the vacancies that we have for cadets, we want to revamp the cadet program to better prepare them for careers in law enforcement.
Okay, great. I like that program. We had some young people in it who were eager to become police officers, and they were in our community, and we need to foster those relationships again and grow our own, for lack of a better description. Next question has to do with the 13 or 8 megahertz radios. What are we using right now? And have we paid for all of those radios?
I would have to defer to Dave Miguez. Can you answer that for me, Dave?
I believe we are, I want to say it's 14 megahertz radios, but I'd have to confirm with my communications director. We're completely outfitted with those. and they're working well. We have a lot better interoperability with other agencies, not just law enforcement agencies, but fire departments and the detention center. So those work out really well.
Is that part of the increase in the capital outlay?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then while I'm on that, what specifically is included in that capital outlay? What was it, 450?
Yeah.
495.5?
I believe so. A small amount of that, 3,000, was office furniture. That's for the most part our dispatcher chairs. I'm sure everybody feels that their office chair is adequate, but when you have somebody sitting in a chair for 12 hours straight, and then when they get up and somebody else sits down in it for another 12 hours, and it just continues like that, we have, we need more robust chairs for that. The evidence storage enhancement that we put in for, that's 144,250.
Officer Miguez, I'm looking at the 495.5 in capital outlay.
Yes.
From budget enhancements. Page.
Yes. So, and then, so as I mentioned, the two enhancements that we put in for, and then software is 318,270. So that's the biggest chunk of that 495. So, okay. I mean, it's probably, I want to say it's a dozen or more different programs that we listed there. If you like, I can go through them, but it's various software programs for many different parts of the department.
So are we doing pay-go for those enhancements for the capital outlays? I don't know why it's in your budget and not in the CIP. And is that a Jody question?
If it's equipment that they're replacing that's smaller and shorter lived, like the CIP is usually reserved for those long-term projects that have a 20-year life. Even our vehicles that we buy are not a part of the CIP. So this would be a shorter life, maybe a 10-year equipment asset, or 5 to 10 to 15, depending on the equipment.
Okay, thank you. Reentry. I know it's a new program. Are we going to see some data as it relates to the number of people that we have in our program? And I'll say it again, it's a new program, but are we seeing any results from the program?
Yes, and I can give you that data now if you like.
Yes.
So reentry, we started June of 2020. The unit has assessed 231 citizens thus far. I see for the month of February and March 2021, the Annapolis Police Department reentry unit assisted in 32 underserved or unrepresented individual men and women with various support, community, and government collaboration. 7 individuals gained permanent employment. That's through our training program. We were able to connect them with full-time permanent employment. They have that now. We had 3 individuals who entered substance abuse treatment programs. 4 were assisted with housing matters, which included permanent housing, sheltered housing, and temporary hotel stays. And that also included some of our victims and witnesses of crime. We had 32 parole and probation face-to-face meeting with APD and the agents. We also had help with the attorney Sipes from the Maryland Public Defender's Office. We had 12 criminal cases of our clients which were expunged. So we helped with that. We also partnered with a organization, Freedom Fighters, which is a reentry program that links returning Annapolis residents with wraparound services. We also partnered with the U.S. Department of Probation. APD probation agent conducted home visits on Annapolis citizen residents, assessing what their needs were coming from federal incarceration. Through our program, assistance was offered to one citizen from the federal program who entered long-term inpatient drug rehabilitation. 2 of our clients volunteered to turn themselves in on warrants after we found out. One of the 2 that turned themselves on warrants, we still in touch with him. We're actually working with him while he's in prison. We have a letter that we just sent over to the superintendent of the correctional facility, and we want to extend our program with some of our partners into the jail. So I think we have pretty good numbers, and all those are Annapolis residents that we help. So I think the program is working.
Thank you, Deputy. Could you share your list with all the council members? I mean, I'm taking notes, but I'm sitting here and there are several that are not with us. So I think it would be beneficial if they see the impact of that program. What about the resource centers? Are we seeing the impact of those 2 centers thus far? And what is it that we should expect to see?
Both aren't open, only one is.
Okay, I can speak to that a little bit. What we're expecting to see is a stable environment where the ultimate goal is to forge a relationship between the officers and the community to solve a lot of problems that don't require a criminal response, and then to prevent a lot of the issues or the changing environment that's responsible for cultivating crime to begin with. And also, it's just not the Annapolis PD's initiative. Of course, we have many partners, the mayor's office, and many community organizations to come in and provide resources. And it's still a work in progress. I rode the city Saturday night, just rode the city. And one of the things that I ordered as of Saturday, and I've said this before, I want to see a presence and some documentation that until we build these things out, get furniture, get the infrastructure in place, I want officers to be in those locations. The things that they could do in the station, I want them to start taking it to these resource centers and having their officers to meet them for consultation, for information exchange and the like. I want them to start meeting in there, even to use the restroom. They have restrooms in them. And so I want them to be out of the station as much as possible in those resource centers. But Alderwoman Finlayson is still a work in progress, and we're building it out. I've been personally inspecting them the last few days to make sure that we do have a presence. Myself and the deputy chief, we were out yesterday, I believe, and actually got on the air and asked for the lieutenant, or by phone to ask the lieutenant to make sure that those stations, both in Madison Street and Tyler Avenue, are maintained. And the sources vary. We're going to have reentry. They've already used it to meet potential clients. We're going to have other resources there that involve agencies beyond us. And for the most part, it's still a work in progress.
Are we seeing an appreciable decrease in crime?
Well, violent crime, we're still struggling with a little bit, but we've definitely seen a decrease in overall crime, property crime, and those other categories I spoke to earlier in my presentation. Of course, what we're still trying to do, and our biggest challenge is to stay on top of gun violence. In one of those areas, the 2 areas I just spoke of, Tyler Avenue and Madison Street, along now with Newtown 20, has been a challenge. And so, although we don't have the community center on Newtown 20, we're working constantly with Rita Dorsey. And of course, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, the challenges that we are trying to resolve with the administration governing Woodside Gardens. We're trying to work something out so that we can, realize some level of security there. We do have an overtime unit stationed on Newtown 20. Newtown at the construction site, I should say, of Newtown 20, particularly on the weekends and the days that tell us when the violence is most likely to occur.
And let me add to that. So overall crime, 2019, 2020, we were down 11.5% in overall crime. That's part 1 crimes. And also, I think significant to add to that, we're also down in arrests. So as we move to a more community-oriented policing model, our arrests has been down significantly. 2019, we had 1,697 arrests. 2020, 998 arrests. And we're at 208 so far this year, which is a trend that's still trending down also.
Thank you, Deputy. And I think we'd like to see those numbers also. And Chief, may I suggest that, Newtown 20 does not exist currently. And I'm always concerned that we label everybody on that street as Newtown 20. And Newtown isn't there, and so they're not the problem. So if we could call it what it is, as much as we don't want to do that, we're tainting those other communities on Newtown Drive with one broad brush. So I would just ask that we be cautious of that. Next question has to do with crisis response. The most recent homicide was where we're talking about. And I learned, because folks were in crisis there, as one should expect, but they didn't get any service. And I was under the impression that when our officers go out, crisis response is automatically called to come in. And I was just very disappointed to learn that that did not happen then. And I called everybody under the sun a couple of days ago because the residents are still in distress over that homicide. So what is the plan for crisis response? I mean, I know we're paying for someone from APD to work with crisis response. I think our expectation in the city is that whenever there's an incident, that they're called in. I don't want us to ever underestimate the impact that a homicide or any tragedy has on the residents. Children, adults alike, doesn't matter. Everyone has a reaction to a tragedy. And so where are we with what crisis response is doing, and how can we better make sure that they respond to our community without being asked? Without being asked. Okay, I know that's a long question. Somebody should have an answer.
So our crisis response in reference to the homicide, they did respond out. They probably did not respond out to the broader community, but they dealt with those people who are directly involved in that. Right now, we have 25 officers that's CIT trained, along with 2 dispatchers that's CIT trained. Myself and the commander of patrol, we just met with Jen Corbin a couple of days ago, and we're looking to revamp that program. What we want to do is to move the program into the city of Annapolis, because we recognize there are some things that's being missed. We do have the one clinician that's there, but on the civilian side of it, I think we need to increase probably what we have responding, because you're talking about a CIT team from the county that basically have county responsibility, that sometimes our follow-ups don't always get done because we didn't have the personnel to do the follow-ups. When I say 25 officers, they spread out throughout the agency, all of them which are not in patrol. So we're coming up with a plan. We just talked about it a couple of days ago to revamp the CIT and make it more responsive to the community.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And Jen Corbin may have told you that I called her the other morning very early to get some assistance. And I was told by one of the officers that crisis response was not called. So anyway, I think I left you a message too, Deputy, about that. Okay, my next question, what is OCM? That acronym was used on one of the slides, and what does that stand for?
I don't know.
Oh, the Office of
I think it may have been a typo. It may have been OEM.
No,
OEM.
Okay, internal and external agency interactions.
City manager. It's the Office of the City Manager. OCM.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's an easy one. Chief, Leadership Anne Arundel, class of 98. Just as a brief aside. Are we doing physicals?
Physical examinations for applicants?
Yes, for officers, yes.
Yes, ma'am. And we always have.
Okay, that's what I thought, but somebody suggested that we weren't doing physicals again. So.
Yeah, no, wait. You may be asking about annual physicals for existing officers.
Yes.
No, we are not. The city stopped doing those a number of years ago, many years ago. When I first came on, we were all doing annual physicals, but it looks like some legislation.
The legislation, that was one of the costs that we said that we had not projected in this budget that we will have to amend. The new state legislature will require the city to have officers do those. It will be a psychological examination will be required every 2 years, and a physical examination will be required every year.
Okay, good to know. And my next question was going to be about the new state law. You, Ms. McCoy, you referenced the law, and I wasn't sure, so it's a two-part question. Are you working on the fiscal impact for the state laws and how they impact our 2022 budget? And are you doing a fiscal impact note on pending legislation in the city? I don't know the number of it, Alderman Savage's legislation. Will we get a fiscal impact note for both of those, existing changes and current?
Yes, let me answer that, Alderwoman. The answer is yes. We're not poised to reveal those numbers now because it's still a work in progress, so we'll just leave it at that. The answer is yes, ma'am, to both.
Well, the state law, we're going to need to know sooner rather than later.
Yes, ma'am. It's more complicated than that. It's many parts of that. I'm still reading it and studying it myself. I'm not being evasive in my answer. It's just that I don't want to give an answer that comes back to haunt me later on. It's very voluminous and robust and very complicated. So we're working on that now, and I'll keep you in the loop, and then the other council member that wants to know. That's the best answer that I could give you at this time.
And that's good enough for me, Chief. I just want to make sure it's coming.
And I say that respectfully.
Contract services. What is included? And maybe this is for Katie. Katie, if I go into OpenGov, can I find out what's included in contract services?
You can find it on page 77 of your budget book. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. Okay. My last question, I think, has to do with recruitment. And Jody has mentioned that I know that we had, 10 positions that we kept vacant, and we have more vacancies than was expected. So what are we doing to enhance recruitment, and particularly as it relates to Annapolitans, or at least residents of Anne Arundel County?
So
do we have a plan?
Yes. So we started back in, I want to say it was April. I believe in February we posted for, February or March, we posted for lateral officers in attempts to fill some of our sworn officer vacancies. And we're still processing applicants, but we have a few that we're putting forward to the chief's office for review for hire. We also recently posted for new hire, entry-level police officer positions to be filled. The difference there is that's people with no prior police experience who would then have to go to an academy. But we want to get that ball rolling as soon as possible so that they're in the academy and as we're still hiring lateral officers. As far as the advertising for that, our recruiting officer, Officer Murphy, has put that out on, I think, every site that he's familiar with, as well as I believe that's still going out on our daily, the police department's daily report that we're hiring. And we, of course, have the one cadet position that we have filled, who's a local resident. We're expecting that cadet to put in for that. So that's what we're doing moving forward to try and fill those vacancies.
And we also want to add, Alderwoman, that of course, this budget was a challenge, and so we were asked to hold back on some of our filling some of our vacancies, and because of COVID, the city of course it was in a budget deficit. However, I had spoken with Officer Murphy, and we were trying to strategize, some ways in which, we would advertise, that we wanted to get people. And one of the things that we didn't put it in the budget, but, we had started planning is that, we would have to increase some things. Other departments are kind of way ahead of us. They have, videos and all kinds of other things that he just does not have to stay competitive. And as you know, law enforcement agencies across the state and across the country are losing people. And for the people that they're getting, or good people that they're trying to get to look at law enforcement, we are all fighting, you say, right, to try to attract those people. And so, we do have or have started, trying to, formalize a comprehensive plan to make, Annapolis more attractive. But again, that will come at a cost.
Yeah, and let me add to that. So, Alderwoman, one of the difficulties we had, because we had shortages with our lateral transfer, more than likely, we're looking for people who have had prior law enforcement. And that was important because we had a critical shortage. So we had to get people to turn around to get those people out into the community and become law enforcement was urgent for us. As it pertains to the new hire, that's going to be a longer process. However, I would say we're going to look at some more innovative ways to do that. But we also need the assistance of those within city government. If you have good candidates, send them our way. You're in touch with your constituents out there. If you know someone who's showing interest, send them our way. We certainly will entertain it and talk to them. Maybe we'll get out more into the community. But we need assistance with trying to get people, residents within Annapolis, to join. So certainly send them out there our way.
Deputy, may I suggest you talk to Director Simmons, who had a program to recruit Annapolitans for the fire department. And I think he was pretty successful when we were hiring a large number.
And I'll do that.
How long from the time they get hired to the boots are on the street? We hire an officer today. He passed the test and all the
He
sites.
probably can tell you much better, but I think it's a little over a year.
Okay, so it still takes a while.
Well, it depends on two things, whether they're lateral or they have no experience. If they're lateral, it's an abbreviated transition from whatever agency they came from to get the education and training they need to satisfy the Maryland Police Commission. Like when we brought Robert Horn as an example, his process was far shorter because he was a career policeman. If we're getting somebody just out of college or off the street, then the process is, I think, 30 weeks or something like that. So it depends on lateral or hire from within. But I want to add this, and this is something that I should say, nobody else. I think we have to develop a program. I think about it all the time where we track individuals. I think that the whole culture would change in this police department if we could someday realize an Annapolitan to be police chief. And I think it's amazing that we haven't done that yet. So that's one of the things that I want to be a part of my legacy, that we identify. Once we do identify an Annapolitan, we need to track that person and groom them and prepare them to head this agency one day. I think if you're born and raised here, you should be given first priority.
Chief, I tell the gentlemen and women that all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
I tell them all that I expect one of them to be the chief one day. Okay, this really is my last question. Under enhancements, suppose you don't get any those 2 enhancements on storage space. What do you do?
Keep our fingers crossed for next year. We're going to do the best we can with the limited resources that we have. As officers may, get injured or something like that, and they work in a light duty capacity, then I try to get them to work with our evidence section to process items for disposal. And we move forward like that, and we just try to brainstorm and come up with any ideas that we can to address, short term, what we're not able to get long term.
Yes, and we will probably, if we don't get those enhancements, we'll be looking very, very vigorously towards a grant, because I have to emphasize that we put those 2 enhancements in because they were critical. They are critical needs. We, of course, you all know we fall under CALEA, and they have come in and did an audit of our facilities, and that's one of the things that they've asked us to improve upon. The evidence, of course, as you know, as we're going and we're putting together better prosecutions so we can get convictions, and the evidence process is a critical component in that, and the DNA analysis is a very critical component. And if you can understand, like yesterday, all the evidence that was presented in the Chauvin trial, we don't want any of our evidence to ever be questioned or thrown out. And one of the critical components is the separation of that DNA, that you wouldn't process suspect information, suspect DNA with victim DNA. So that these are critical things that we put in as a risk management strategy, so we can minimize or mitigate any problems in our prosecutions.
And one other thing I'll add to that, and this is going to be critical, and we just discovered this the other day. In Minneapolis, you had the one female who shot I forget the guy's name, and there was a difference between handgun and taser. We discovered, I saw it the other day, that all of our tasers are black. From an untrained eye, you can't distinguish handgun from taser. And that's something that we're going to have to address. And it's going to cost some money to get those tasers changed out to a different color so that we don't have the same issue.
But in the interim, colored duct tape might help you a little bit.
It's not as simple as that.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be light about it.
It should be just as simple as an officer knowing that a gun is a gun and a taser is a taser, regardless of color.
Well, I'm not getting to that debate. I said to an untrained eye, the perception of citizens on the street, whether or not they had a gun pulled or a taser pulled. So you're absolutely right. As an officer's concerned, we hope that the training will win that day out. But sometimes the perception from the community, whether the officer had a taser pulled or a gun pulled, that's why I say untrained eye.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Ms. McCoy. That was the end of my questions.
Thank you for those questions, Alderwoman Finlayson, and I think we look forward to some of the backup materials from APD. I want to slip in 2 questions. Alderman Payon has had his hand up, and Alderman Gay has been waiting patiently. My questions are related, and they have to do with community policing and meeting the adequate public facility criteria. As we continue to not be up at full complement in the number of officers, and we understand the problems, everybody's competing from the same pool, how are we going to manage to fully implement our community policing program, which really requires feet on the street and officers consistently commingling with the populations that they're serving? And Dr. Nash mentioned that she's working on the adequate public facilities, but I think for a long time, we've never been at that 3.2 officers per 1,000 that the current APF law requires. So if that is the case, we can't meet that 3.2. We shouldn't be doing any new development in the city until we get to that ratio. So two questions related to our staffing levels going in somewhat different directions.
Well, Alderman, the only thing we can do is to do the best that we can with the resources that we have. I do believe that too many excuses are just tools of the incompetent. So every day I come to work, that's my job as chief, to find a way to do the best that I can. And I'm at peace with myself as long as I come here every day and try to encourage and facilitate us making the best utilization of the resources that we have. So it's no silver bullet to address that issue. All we can do is prevent our needs, do a needs assessment, and then if the city's unable to support that, then we just have to, the business of the city has to go on. What we've been doing, if Dr. Nash is on this presentation, we've just tried to find ways to legitimately, and not gimmickly, but legitimately mitigate, if you will, any progress that the city has by requiring things like technology to assist us in protecting these facilities once they come up. That's become the expectation with consultation of our legal department. So we've been crafting ideas to help mitigate that. Should something happen, we're fully able to justify that we've met that by requiring the facilities to meet us somewhere in the middle so that the citizens can expect that those facilities will be adequately protected. But sir, all I can do is the budget that's granted to me. I just try to make the best utilization. The thing that I'm proud of most, and this is not an emotional statement, it's actually a factual one. All hands are on deck in the Annapolis PD. On any given day, I'll challenge the residents. They see me out there, they see the deputy chief. I remember not so long ago, the deputy chief and I actually apprehended a person who had just assaulted a domestic dispute while we were out riding. So we're not asking the men and women to do anything that we're not willing to do at any given time because we are so short. My day doesn't start and end by just sitting in my office here on Taylor Avenue. We're out in the community and we're doing those kind of soft and hard things that are needed. Stan and I, we are the command staff right now, me and my deputy chief. So a lot of command decisions that have been historically made by captains, we have been doing because we're so short. But whatever we do, the residents have to be satisfied with the services that we're providing. And I'm confident, I really am, that we're doing many things that the residents expect of us. We don't receive a lot of complaints.
Can I add to that? Just to answer your question, reference community policing. So my thought is that community policing, you don't need specific units. Although we have the reentry unit, Lieutenant Kraus and his guys from the community outreach. Last year, they did 1,257 community events. I just read off what the reentry unit did. Our goal is to make sure that every police officer, whether you're an administrative officer or whether you're in patrol, to become community oriented. And that's a mindset. That's not necessarily everybody has to go and do an event. It's how we interact with the citizens. We take those calls and handle problems and try to resolve some of those problems. We've done things such as relocating people and working with some of the homeless encampments. And you guys know, some of you guys know as well as I do, I take a direct approach to some of these issues. When you guys call me, I make sure I call you directly back. If you have constituents that have problems, we contact them directly. We work out those issues. So that's how community policing gets done. It's everybody in APD working with the citizens and doing those things that need to be done.
So I'm glad you gave that response because I can tell you that does not square with my perception of what my community thinks of as community policing. And they may not have a correct perception. but they don't feel that they're getting community policing yet. And even with all the good work Officer Kraus does, and I really do appreciate his efforts, as I do all of the APD personnel, but as long as shots fired continue to ring out, the community is going to feel that they're not safe, and they do feel that whatever this amorphous concept of community policing, until it's fully implemented, they're not going to be feeling safe. And part of the understanding I have, and you can correct my misperception if it's one, is that having our full complement of officers is something that will increase the police presence. I think many people see community policing as a visible police officer in their neighborhood pretty frequently, if not continuously. Clearly, we don't have the resources to do that, and maybe that isn't what community policing is. And if it's not, then we need to do a better job, not only of getting the message out to constituents, but to some of us electeds too, because I don't think that message is getting carried out.
Well, absolutely. And I think we do need those increased numbers. And forgive me for saying this, and I said this to the chief, but I think this need to be said. Any given shift here in Annapolis, you have for the entire city 6, sometimes 7 police officers to handle all the situations that occur in the city of Annapolis. I like eating Chick-fil-A. I go down to Chick-fil-A and I see in that 3,000 square foot building that they have at least 11 people in there to ensure that people get their sandwiches and salads on a daily basis. If Chick-fil-A can recognize good community service, and I know it's a product that they're getting a profit from, but I think we missing the mark if only thing we have on any given day is 6 officers to handle the problems in this city, which are many. So I think we do need to increase those numbers, and we are short.
So I like what you're saying, and I think that one of the goals that we should have, or at least I have as a council member and a budgeteer, is we have to figure out a way to get those numbers up. There's nothing that makes you feel good, unless you're being stopped for a traffic violation, makes you feel good than seeing a police officer around. It makes you feel secure. And you're right, I don't think most citizens realize how few officers are actually available on any given shift. Sometimes it's a little bit more, but most of the time it's that small. And so that's less than 1 officer per square mile if we're a 7.5 square mile city. That isn't going to cut it in terms of people feeling secure, and also the deterrent effect of having police officers visible in pretty copious amounts of places at all the appropriate times. But that also, that lack of a number of officers getting up to strength does affect the APF. And Dr. Nash, I'm sure for sanity's sake, went back to her office and isn't with us. But I did suggest to the chair of the Rules Committee that we need to have a powwow with her and whoever else is appropriate to look at APF and the changes she has in mind. I took the implication that she was working with APD and all the other departments to come up with potential changes. But I think we need to hear as policymakers what those changes would look like. If we just simply reduce the ratio from 3.2, and who knows the origin of that ratio or its validity, but if we simply reduce it from 3.2 to say 2.8, have we really done anything to increase the policing levels that we need? And my argument would be, no, we haven't. So I would hope that when we, Tuesday night, when we get back into a meeting of the whole with the council, with you and Fire and Public Works, that we talk about real things that we can do to increase the number of officers. I think everybody wants to see that happen. Everybody has the hope that that will make a difference. So I'll leave my comments at that. Alderman Payon and Alderman Gay have been waiting patiently. Fred, do you want to go next, please?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, thank you for answering our questions as best you can. I'm not going to lecture. I'm not going to preach. I just have a couple of questions I would like to ask. And one area I'd like to cover is how many sworn police officers do we have right now? We have 126 that we have. That number is what we've designated for the size of our force. But I think most of us are under the understanding that we don't have 126. How many do we have?
Yes, sir. I think Miguel's going to give you the exact numbers. The last count, and it changes daily. We just had an officer resign a couple of days ago. We have been operating most of the year at 110, but I think it's a little less than that now. We had a resignation a couple of days ago. An officer got a commission in the Maryland National Guard to the rank of major, so she resigned her position here to accept that one. So if you can get on the line, Acting Captain Miguez, and answer the council, the alderman's question, the exact numbers. I want to say around 109, but I'm not sure.
That's exactly correct, Chief. We're currently at 109.
All right. And how many are you requesting in this year's budget?
Well, when Director Dickinson mentioned that they budgeted us for the same turnover as this current fiscal year, that was $839,000. That's not specific. That doesn't have to specifically be made up completely of sworn positions. And so, like this year,
well, my question is, how many have we requested in the budget? Last year it was all 126.
Oh yes, sir. Our position summary is the same as it was.
Okay. Well, now I'll get to the question. What happened to the money from last year's budget that was designated for the 126? We all knew ahead of time that it wouldn't be filled. Although we were hoping to get maybe as many as 118 or 19. Realistically, we all knew that we wouldn't be able to fill this. What's happened to this? I think you mentioned $800 and some odd $1,000.
Thanks.
So I know that.
Hold on. Let me answer that. So you'll recall, Alderman Payon, last year, in order to balance the budget, we increased the vacancy factor, what I call the vacancy factor, what I think Jody calls turnover. We increased that in order to balance the budget. So we took that savings and said, we reduced the amount of expenditures for FY21 based on that saving $800,000 in police positions. So that's where the money went. It was taken out of expenditures because we didn't have the revenue to cover that. I think it's important to know, though, that even with that vacancy savings, they have additional vacancy savings because the difficulty here, I mean, part of it's funding, but a big part of it is recruiting and trying to find police officers to fill the positions that we have. We've had this situation for the 10 years that I've been here. There's always been a big savings. Some of it wasn't taken as vacancy savings, but each year there would be a large savings because police weren't able to fill their positions because of recruiting difficulties.
Well,
so part of the issue is funding, but a big part of the issue is just being able to get qualified officers.
Well, why don't we have that a little truth in budgeting here? Why don't we just call it what it is? I mean, we know that we're not going to be able to fill 126 spots. I mean, what are we going to do with the money next year?
That's exactly what we're doing. We're taking a vacancy savings again and reducing the expenditures because we know we're not going to fill them. So this year it's going to be $700,000 that we're taking as savings. So we reduce the city's expenditures by that amount, and that helps us to balance the budget. It's not like there's money that goes somewhere. That's an expenditure line item. And we've reduced the expenditures because of that vacancy amount.
Well, due to the late hour, I won't debate you. I promise. So let me move on. The next area that I have, and it's the only other area I have left, is every year we talk about a crime lab. I understand we've hired some people that, crime lab techs, crime techs, and things like that. But are we ever going to have a crime lab where we do our own DNA work, we do our own DWI testing, we do our own drug testing, that sort of thing, instead of sending it out to Anne Arundel County or the state lab?
We will, with the enhancement that we put in for, we will be able to do some processing here, but there are certain facilities and equipment that is just not feasible for us to have, for example, to do our own drug analysis. I would shudder to think how much we would have to spend to be able to do our own drug analysis here and hire the people certified to do that analysis.
Yeah.
We lost the employee that we had in the position because they went to another agency with a slightly higher salary. And so that's, as always, our struggle is getting salary and benefits that are comparable with other agencies to get people here and to keep them here.
Now we do pay when we send these things out, do we not?
Yes, we do pay for, there's not only other agencies, government agencies that we send evidence out to for analysis, but also private companies as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, my iPad is down to single digits. I'm whether I want to stay on or not, I'm going to run out shortly. So if I abruptly say goodbye, I'm not trying to be rude.
Okay, you scared me for a second. I thought you were starting to say IQ, and
No.
Broadcast that. So I would like to point out in the budget binder on page 76, the request for officers in this year is down from 126 to 124. That alone would put us under the 3.2 ratio for APF. But I'm kind of curious why we're going down, if I did my additions correctly, why we're going down 2 sworn officers in the request.
I don't see that, but
okay.
No, I can answer that. It should be 124. What they were doing is counting the chief and the deputy chief. You don't count them. If you talk about the definition of a police officer, they're talking about the men and women whose charge is to go out and enforce the law. We're administrators. So the 124 is the actual number.
All right, so thank you for that. Alderman Gay, you've been very patient. Are you available to ask questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to start with the presentation. If you could go back to the slide, I believe it had the administrative roles laid out. And I appreciate you guys using the Prezi. It's nice, you know. Awesome. I think this was it. And so now I'm going to bring your attention to page 76 in the budget book, because I think these two things are lined up with one another, and just get some explanations on roles. Starting with, I'll start with Police Officer 1C, grade P11, and they're scheduled for 50. Can the explanation of that, or those are the actual officers that are on the streets?
No, that's the number of positions that we have, Alderman Gay.
Yeah. So, but what are their actual roles?
You mean where are they serving within the department?
Yeah. Like what are their duties? Their like.
So
76.
Go ahead.
You said page 6. You mean page 76?
76.
Okay.
So the bulk of them are in patrol, but we also have some of them in criminal investigations, some of them in special operations. But that's the vast majority of the officers, and the 1/C, which is a PFC, Officer First Class, are in patrol.
And so I'm assuming that the one just beneath that are basically the same thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so what makes up the police sergeant? I see there's 13 sergeants and corporal, and they're just a grade apart. So I'm assuming the roles are pretty close. What are the differences there?
There's a slight difference in what the sergeant is able to sign off on, or what they're able to do administratively as opposed to a corporal. But, and especially in the patrol division, they share, for the most part, very similar responsibilities in supervising the officers who are working the street.
And if I may, Alderman Gay, from a practical standpoint, we do have sergeants, but they do get vacation, they get time off, they get time away from APD. The corporal's role is normally to step into, assist the sergeant. They may be, on a homicide and, at a homicide scene, and then you would need someone to take care of the rest of the city. And then the corporal would step in to those shoes, but, just not at the rank of the sergeant. And of course, in the sergeant's absence, the corporal would step in and take over those supervisory duties.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what roles each play, especially when it's a large number. Police communications operator, I see there's police communication operator 1 and 2. In total, there's 12, but there's 9 of the 1 and 3 of the 2. What is the difference in those 2 roles?
So similar to the officers, the PCO2 are the supervisor positions, and the PCO1s are just non-supervisor positions.
So the title says communications operator. So are they basically just like a liaison between maybe the administrative staff and the patrol division, or?
No, they are working in our communications center with, they work side by side. So we have four shifts of the positions would be 4 shifts of 3 people each, 1 supervisor and 2 PCOs.
Okay, so that's like when we call in. Is that role?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah.
Like when we call into the
911.
Yes,
okay.
If somebody calls, whether it's either 911 or the non-emergency numbers, and the dispatchers that the officers are talking to on the radio on various channels, yes.
Okay, and then I'm assuming when you talked about there was some backup in the basement in regards to keeping the records, I'm assuming all 5 of these roles are needed for a police record specialist if you're backed up?
No, where I was talking about, so those are for our records section. When I mentioned, what I was talking about earlier was the evidence section. We have actually just below the police communications operator position, police property coordinator. So we have 1. Ideally, I'd like a second person, but the enhancements that we put in for are less expensive than hiring an additional person, even over a 2-year period.
And so just before I move on to the next question and second subject, just because the conversation from my colleagues have come up plenty of times as it relates to adequate public facilities and the amount of officers that we have. One thing that we have noticed over the course of the last year, and thank God for the state legislation because it provides flexibility in how and what a police officer is and can be, is that you don't always need a police officer with a gun to count as a physical officer. We look at places like Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is like ground zero for police issues right now, where they are actually bringing in, like clinical technicians, psychiatrists to be counted as sworn members of their police department, and they're responding on calls where it may not be necessary to have an officer with a gun respond. And so I think that as we look at changes to that code, we can, as my colleague from Ward 1 likes to say, reimagine what the role of a police officer is. And that's something that we should definitely take up as in the next couple of months with the peace legislation as well. Just as it relates to the adequate public facilities code, which always, it comes up in the conversation. Could you go
Before
to
you go on, Alderman Gay, I want to interject two things. First of all, amen to what you just said. I think that we really do need to be thinking about that. And I would point out that the numbers here on this slide add up to 115 sworn officers. So I'm wondering where the other 9 are that are in the table on page 76 that adds up to 124.
It's a good question. I'm talking with Rhonda now.
They're in re-entry and cold case.
Along with.
But are they categorized as, so where are they in our list of FTEs on the staffing on page 76 of our binder? Where would we find those 9 people? Presumably they have a grade classification of P if they're a sworn officer, but they're not, it's hard to figure out where those 9 people are.
2 of them are the chief and two of them are the chief and the deputy.
Okay. So.
Well, okay. Maybe we could get more of a clarification, but there's a distinct difference between what's shown on this slide and what's shown in our budget books. And they could both be correct, but it's 9 officers unaccounted for, and Lord knows we're down enough without having 9 officers unaccounted for. So, Alderman Gay, I really do think that as a council, we need to pursue that topic that line of thought that you just brought up. And I've often wondered what a difference it would make if, say, traffic people were not armed. I mean, the worst could happen is when somebody gets aggressive, they let them go. And we get their license plate and we follow up on them later on. We don't always have to pull them out of the car and frisk them and find out they're armed and do some of the tragic things that have been happening in traffic stops. It seems like a traffic stop, no matter how egregious, is an awful place to lose your life.
Alderman, one of the things that Alderman Gay, before you get started, one of the things that I did want to say is that, the chief, have been thinking about these things as well. And one of the things that, we did, try to put in and, not, kind of in the way that you thought about it, but internally, to be able to send more officers back out on the street. Some of the positions that we thought about civilianizing was, and now that, LEOBR is going by the wayside, it'll be easier, is in our internal investigation section, civilianizing that to an officer who has powers, only for investigating internal affairs events.
Well, but my concern with that is with adequate public facilities, the definition is, I think it counts sworn officers, and they're specific because we had this discussion last year too. They are specific in saying that they must be on the street. And so we have to, we can discuss this, and we got a work session coming up in a couple weeks where I'm sure we will get into this in great detail.
But I don't want to be any confusion. I'm not in support of pulling over people who are non-armed. That creates a whole lot of other problems. So I heard it's been said that that's my position. That's not my position. I don't support pulling over civilians, pulling over cars. Another part of this that's not told, most traffic stops don't result in civilians getting killed. They result in police officers getting killed. That's a whole nother conversation for another time. And that's a fact. I'll state that publicly. The vast majority of people who are murdered as a result of traffic stops are police officers. Just had one gunned down the other day, less than 5 days ago. In another state, he was shot at a rifle. And when they pulled him over, if you watch the video, before the officer could even react, he was shot and killed. And so that's another conversation. And I don't want to get into sound bites and making generalizations. It's far more complicated than that. Policing is unpredictable. Human behavior is unpredictable. So we can't paint these scenarios with a broad brush and say that these things actually occur. You don't know what's on the other side of a door when you knock on it.
Exactly, you don't. And I didn't advocate for that. What I'm saying is if somebody is having a mental fit and an officer shows up and the first instinct is to tase or shoot them, you don't need that. You need someone who is trained in that profession to handle the situation. Now, granted, will they need an officer there just in case things go wrong? Yes. We're not saying abolish the police, but we're saying make it more community-based, make it community-focused in some of these social issues that we know we have.
Yes, sir. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about I'm talking more specific about pulling over cars and letting them go. And then somebody said, I don't know if it was my staff, but it was said that the chief's position is, and my position is not to put people out on the street in the traffic division that's unarmed or not uniformed police. That's all. We can talk point of clarification.
Yeah, because I just have some other questions. So can these three positions be conjoined into one in regards to savings? Alert grant coordinator, and MCIN grant coordinator. Obviously, I'm assuming that the alert grant coordinator and the MCIN grant coordinator have some sort of special qualification as it looks like it's related to a program. But can those three roles be combined?
Both of those are part-time positions.
Part-time, yeah.
They could be, but it would more than likely, at that point, we would be converting them both
to full-time
to civil service. And we're, we have to, currently we're having to pick and choose, what we put forward for civil service conversion.
And what we can tell you, Alderman, is that, with the part-time positions, they are overwhelmed. That sometimes we all have to step in and do. I'd like to say about the Annapolis Police Department it's a collection of people doing a myriad of different things. So sometimes our community service coordinator steps in to assist the grant coordinator and fill gaps. So if you're asking, if we can separate these two, there are marked differences. There are a lot of work to compile and with both those duties and with the work that they currently have, they're supplemented by people who are already here, helping them to do that work.
Okay, thank you for that. What about the special events coordinator? I'm assuming that based on this being police, they aren't actually coordinating, creating the event, but coordinating, creating the possible response. Is this something very much similar to what OEM does when they are prepping and preparing for events that there may have to be a police presence at?
Yes, so the special events coordinator is liaising with event organizers. He's been doing this for 20 years or so. That's one of our contractual positions, and gauging from the event and what's happening, how much staffing we're going to need for that, and giving feedback to downtown as far as impact on the city when they send out event registration, applications.
Okay. Again, and I'm just, this is not, I don't even know who the individual is. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of this budget.
Yeah.
the next slide, please. I believe it was investigations and community services. Awesome. Thank you very much. I had questions about this as it related to two things that came up at this point. The first was the, I think he talked about this during community engagement, and Alderwoman Finlayson mentioned it as well, the crisis response, which the city pays about $100 and some change dollars a year. And as Alderwoman Finlayson mentioned, our constituents talk, and they are not pleased with the response in crisis response. I mean, shootings, overdoses, domestic violence incidents, they don't show up. And so it's not to say that this program is not successful and touted across the nation, as everyone says. I believe that it is successful, but I don't believe that we, the city of Annapolis, their neighbors, are getting the best bang for the buck. One of the amendments that I will introduce is, again, to cut the funding for this program and look at reinvesting it through community caring services or through another role in the police department. We don't get the response we need. It's that, point blank period. And we've been saying this since I've been on the council, and we've talked about adding it to the code that officers are required to call on the scene. We talked about, but it just hasn't happened. The response hasn't gotten better. So that's one amendment that I plan on introducing as it related to this section of the slide, community engagement. And I did have questions as it related to the performance measures on this slide. It says solved 7 of 10 attempted homicides during the course of the last fiscal year. So these are incidents where the individual, and obviously that means they didn't die, but I'm just breaking it down for the public that's listening. These are incidents where the individual was not murdered or killed. So what is the performance measure on actual murders in the city of Annapolis? And I'm talking about back to Terry Bosley and I think 2017 to now, where, because that's a huge part of community trust too.
Our deputy, I don't know if you have it sounds like Alderman Gay, are you asking about
comparisons from 2017?
Closure stats on homicides?
If that's what is officially or professionally described as, yes.
Okay, yeah, deputy or chief. I don't have the stats in front of me, and certainly not for prior years. I don't know if
we had it for the calendar year, Alderman, which is, of course, the 3 homicides that that we solved in this budget cycle. But if you want a comparison from with our stats from 2017 until the present, we will get those to you.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful because, again, as we talk about community policing, which I'm a huge believer in with this chief and the vision that you guys have laid out. But a part of that is, again, solving the murders and making people feel comfortable in their communities. And so that's important to me. I did have questions as it related to the budget as well in regards to what, but I'll have to look at the online budget, and I don't have that in front of me now, the line item details and just get a better understanding of what potentially can be cut and what can't be. Understanding that you guys obviously operate under a tight budget. And so like fire, it's majority of the staff and salary. And so maybe, Jody, if you could provide me with some best practices, for dealing with an issue like this as it related to the staff and salary. I know one of the things that still sticks with me is the other day when we were saying that the city pays 34% of the pension for this department and the fire department, as opposed to the 10% that they pay in for other employees. So just help there. I think that would help me significantly with the $22 million budget the police department has.
So Alderman Gay, thank you for those questions. And I would remind that we are now, I think, pretty firmly scheduled to reconvene as a committee of the whole Tuesday evening, the 27th at 6. And for all council members, including myself, I think for these sort of detailed questions, it would be very helpful to get them to the chief and to the finance director in advance so that they have the opportunity to pull up the data that you're seeking. Sort of hitting them cold right now is probably not the best way to do business. But I do thank you for your questions, and I look forward to an engaging meeting Tuesday evening. At this point, before I recognize Alderwoman Tierney, I want to say, because of my schedule, once again, Comcast didn't show up yesterday. I'm going to have to ask for a hard stop at 2 o'clock. So mindful that we're going to be reconvening Tuesday evening, and mindful that we're well over our time allotment and so forth. If we could get in sort of upper level kinds of questions, and then for more detailed questions, send in an email request to the finance director and to the chief. And copy the finance committee with those as well, please, if you would. So Alderman Gay, does that conclude your questions for now?
Yeah, to your point, I'm going to wait till Tuesday, so I actually have the line item budget in front of me, but those were just some quick questions I had today. Okay,
we appreciate that. Alderman Tierney, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, I do like Alderwoman Finlayson's idea in the interim to put yellow tape on those tasers. But in all seriousness, I do get that that we, especially in light of the presentation that Ron and Alderman Gay and I were fortunate to have at Housing and Human Welfare, this cancer of opioid and all that. And these are unprecedented times, and we have a cacophony of crises, including, opioids and mental health. And it's causing a shift. I understand that in your resources. But I was very happy to hear about this new CAD system, which I understand is, and forgive me, I'm a layperson as far as, but I read a lot, but this dispatch system. And could we look at as a potential savings long-term as far as having the ability to coordinate your services with what's happening in the mayor's office, also with the crisis response. My point is that can this dispatch service be aligned so that if it is a mental health issue, boom, it goes to the mayor's office or somebody else. There's a cost to, and I know you have this, to when you arrive at a scene. And so then you can direct, direct accordingly. And I think this is really important. I know it's done in other cities, so much so that they have set up another dispatch number for those. I don't want to say non-emergencies. They're not non-emergencies, but they involve, mental health, and domestic abuse. Actually, that might be more violent, but you know what I'm getting at. I'm not sure who can answer this, but I don't even know if I expect an answer. I really just want you to memorialize this idea and make the best of this new this new CAD system that is your dispatch. So that's my comment. I don't know if it involves an answer. And then just scrubbing the budget, this is silly, but not really. I want you all to be healthy. That's really important. And I did notice that fire protection has $82,200 in physical exams, and our human resource has $65,600 in physical exams. Somehow that bucket of money should be looked at and reallocated. So whatever you need is in there. I'm not advocating to add money, but there might little bit of physical exam coordination needs to be done there, just in the interest of you all being healthy. But again, I really hope that this CAD system turns you into adjust your resources accordingly to align with the difficulties of this time. Thank you.
Ma'am, I can answer that a little bit, Alderwoman Tierney. Like Baltimore, for example, has a 311 system. Of course, the county operates ours. Baltimore City is its own county, so they're able to have a 311 system, an alternative to 911. And what that 311 system does is it diverts non-emergency issues that residents have, and it sends them to the proper agencies. I don't know how much we can do that or replicate that in CAD because we don't have our own 911 system. We depend on Anne Arundel County, and most jurisdictions are like that, with the exception of Baltimore City. But surely I'll have a conversation, because I think it's a great idea that you proposed, that we look into that. I do know CAD has a lot of features that deal primarily with officer safety, like GPS, like I stated earlier in the presentation, and a hazard file and things of that nature. But surely if we could divert some of those things that are non-police related issues, especially after the police arrive on the scene and determine that there's no immediate threat, that we can divert that to other agencies. That's a great idea.
And also to prevent a tragedy where somebody is dealing with mental health issues and then he's inadvertently, shot or whatever.
So we currently do that, some of that now.
Okay.
As I said earlier, we do have a dispatch who is CIT trained, and their job is to make the assessment when that call come on and make sure that they send a CIT trained officer to that call. So there's been times where a CIT officer has gone to a mental crisis call rather than just a regular officer, where that officer specifically called just to go to that particular call. I remember when I first got here, there was a guy who was taking his clothes off, was running in around downtown. Well, the CIT officers were put on that call because they knew how to handle it. It was handled successfully. So if we can increase our capacity and bring other agencies into that and get the proper training, I think is a great idea.
Okay. I want to defer to the chair of public safety. She's been waiting to ask questions. So thank you again.
Yes, Alderwoman Pinto-Charles, I'm sorry, my screen does not show a hands up. So I just was looking at participants and seeing that long and patient and had a hands up on that. So
the hands up may have flowed into the same color scheme. I don't know. But anyway, I've been listening. I've been listening to the conversations and the discussions and watching, and I think it's been extremely helpful. But I just want to, as I said to Dr. Nash, I want to say the same thing to Chief Jackson about his presentation, the cadre of professionals that he's brought to the table. He has not been here 2 years as yet, but based on my own public safety background, I'm very encouraged. We've had some great suggestions. We've had some great insight, some things that we can move forward on. Everyone's voice is certainly very worthy. I want to also indicate something that Alderwoman Finlayson said, that, and also that the chief has picked up on. I would definitely like to see the cadet program continue, because I think I do, and I would like to see someone from our city at some point being police chief. I think that would be a great testimony to what we do. The one thing I want to say, and I've been watching everything that's going on television, I don't want us to get, with any profession, I don't care what the profession is, there are going to be some there who do not hold the line and who do not act in a professional manner. But I don't want us going down the road of being cookie cutter. If something works here, it may not work somewhere else, and vice versa. I think what we need is a tailored approach to what we do in the city of Annapolis until something tells us otherwise, because I think we show great respect for those who serve, that we do respect what they're doing. No profession, I'm an attorney. When they're bad attorneys, I don't want to be painted with the same brush as those that I read about who have not done what they're supposed to do. I don't want anybody to think that's the way I perform or have performed in the past. So I think out of general respect, I think we ought to have a tailor-made community policing and other initiatives for the city of Annapolis. I was in Baltimore City, and I would not dare say we should do the same things they're doing or they should do the same things that we're doing. But anyway, the other thing I want to mention, I know there was a conversation about APF. As a public safety chair, I would definitely like to be a part of those conversations as well, and anything else that comes along concerning our Police Department, Fire Department, and Office of Emergency Management. So thank you all very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it and everything that we're all doing to make Annapolis even better than what it is. We have our challenges, no doubt about it, and we're going to work on them. But thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I think you made the perfect concluding remarks. We certainly do thank you, Chief, and all of the staff, Deputy Chief, everyone. You can tell that we're interested by the volume of questions. I don't think you should, I hope you don't take questions as criticism. I hope you see them as genuine interest and a genuine concern that we have the best policing that we can and that we give you the best resources we can so that you can do your job for us. So I want to thank you. This has probably been the most colorful presentation we've had and the most complicated. So we do appreciate that. It enlivened our lives. And we will be picking up the thread of these same questions Tuesday evening. It looks like we're pretty much set up to have a meeting starting at 6 at Tuesday evening. I've heard from all three of our alderpersons who work during the day and they can make that meeting. So, and I'm assuming everybody here, and I thank all of my colleagues outside of the Finance Committee for spending all this time with us. I think it's time well spent, but I'm assuming everybody is in sync that we will pick up the threads of this discussion, add fire and add public works, and we'll see where we get Tuesday evening. And with that, unless there are some remarks from any of the committee members, I would entertain to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, again, Chief and everybody, thank you. This has been a very enlightening and rewarding presentation. And so your reward is we'll see you again Tuesday evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody.